Uh, so yeah, I suppose that we should just stay right where we were and just say, yeah, Gio, you gotta stay where you're at. You gotta stay where you are. Don't come
Or
back. Don't come back.
remigration now.
Remigration now. I'm Martin Sellner for everyone. Just remigration now. Remigration forever. It's a lot safer than what we were talking about behind the scenes in the green room. So I think that it's all safe to say that we're doing quite well this afternoon. What is today? I think this is the first Tuesday we've actually been back on our regular schedule in 3 or 4 weeks. The holidays and then you traveling and coming into my country has been so problematic. But nevertheless, glad to finally be back on schedule because we are live. It is the Digital Archipelago episode 118. And with all the USAID news, with all these court injunctions over budgets and money and grant spending, and even my own place of work panicking like crazy, we all have to ask one singular and important question. Where's my money? Where is my money? And I've seen black pastors on Twitter telling me that Trump wants to slash the IRS. And you know what their response to that was? Their response was, well, if they get rid of the IRS, well, there's no tax check with your refund. And I'm thinking to myself, do they not understand? But of course they don't understand. And this is not what it's about. But before I go too far into the episode, my ramblings, of course, I am joined by my lovable co-host, the 2-ton wonton from Saskatchewan, Gio Pinichetti. How are you?
Oh, yeah. I'm all right. It's just, yeah. I don't know.
I can feel the energy. Thank you, Gio. And joining us today is a friend of the show, a man who has been in my comment section and the chat of this show, but in numerous other places been interviewed by Jay Burden and countless others. Mr. Sean Wieland, how are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. Proud to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy to have you on. You sparked my autism on something that I know absolutely nothing about. And you as a financial planner and someone who works in wealth management, I thought you'd be the perfect gentleman to have come on the show. Let me go look at the comments and say hello, everyone.
Sean, didn't you come on before, or am I imagining this?
I believe it's not my first time. Yeah, I don't think I'm a Prudentialist virgin. It may be first time on the Archipelago though. So probably first time with you, Gio.
Yeah, okay, that's what it was.
I was like, he's been on before, but I think not for the show.
I imagined that. I had a fugue state.
There you go.
Yeah.
Fugue state. That's true. That's very true. We all have our fugue states. Like for some reason, people think that we're fellow human elite capital. I mean, stay away. I don't look like Richard Hanani, and none of us do. So I think we're safe. However, I hope that Richard's okay. I think with the USAID budget being cut, it's only a matter of time that the PEPFAR money runs out. We should keep him in our prayers. So let's just dive into it. Sean, I wanted to have you on the show because you and I were having some conversations a couple of weeks ago, and you had said something that really piqued my interest, which was sort of the strategy that this administration's doing with sort of its elites, the Silicon Valley crowd and this faction. And you had said a leveraged buyout of America, and that can go cut really either two ways. Like you can look at this like the Arthur Bournbrook style of 90s neo-Marxism, or you can look at this as a Mulebuggian financial thing. So Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then maybe your thoughts on all this.
Okay, yeah, so real quick recap. My background is in wealth management. My expertise is more in capital formation, risk management, portfolio construction, that sort of thing. I've been doing that primarily for exit planning of businesses for over a decade. So I'm intimately familiar with capital structure, both on the private side in terms of valuation and sale of businesses or rolling them up into venture capital, and then as well as in public markets as well. I've also for a while now been working on a book on how publicly traded stock is how the managerial regime or the managerial revolution was able to bootstrap itself. And that's a fair segue into kind of these new developments. The leverage buyout thing. So in full disclosure, there's two sides. The domestic side, what that means for us in terms of reshoring manufacturing, and how the incoming regime is gonna finance that. I did already promise that side of it to Jay Bird in an upcoming podcast, but since you are excellent and the audience is very well catered to the international affairs, offensive realism, the sovereign wealth fund aspect of this is the other half of that. So JD Vance did a speech, and a lot of the research I've been doing is on the resource curse. And specifically, I think in America, we have a synthetic resource curse, which is Wall Street. And that comes about as a result of the managerial revolution. So, and I know I'm kind of all over the place on this already. I'm going to try to distill it down to and get some of this jargon defined, but bear with me here a little bit.
Sure. So, I mean, when I hear resource curse, I usually think about this in I go back to my university classes in history, and I think about like what they would call like the Spanish resource curse when it came to financial management with the Spanish Empire and the New World in the Americas. Is that a comparable definition that we're working with here? Or is it something different?
So the traditional definition, and this will be good to segue into defining what a sovereign wealth fund is as well. But so if you think of like African countries in mining, or the Middle Eastern states with oil, and then of course famously the Scandinavian states like Norway, the problem becomes that when you discover a resource that is so profitable, where the margins are so good compared to manufacturing or agriculture, that they tend to crowd out the rest of the economy, and you end up being an exporter of just one single thing, and it destroys the rest of the economy. So that's the resource curse. If you had the choice between investing in capital structure that's going to take 30 years to amortize, and it's a liquid for that period, or you have an option where you're going to get your money back in 6 months, and it's basically 100% profit and a sure thing, you're going to invest in that sure thing. So that's how, oil or natural gas or what have you tends to, if you have opportunity cost between where investors are going to put their funds, they're going to put it in that fast, easy, guaranteed thing every time. The problem is that'll wreck your economy, because then all the other things that you need for a vibrant, complex economy end up being capital starved. So what countries such as Norway have done to try to contain that issue of the resource curse is they say, okay, well, all of the wealth that's coming from that is going to be put into this fund, the surpluses, and then that's going to be invested for some future purpose. And it's not original to them either. Actually, the United States has that in the form of the Alaskan Permanent Fund is a really classic example of, the oil in Alaska gets funded that if you're a resident of Alaska, you're getting mailbox money in exchange for the fact that, your land is being used to extract those oil riches.
I see. Okay. Well, for me, I always think about these sort of funds as not as a payout to citizens, but I mean, like Texas has its like state rainy day fund.
Yeah. So Texas, if I remember correctly, is actually the first in the 1870s. They had the permanent fund for education. Originally, I think it was for state education. Then eventually they included universities as well. But yeah, they're the other classic example within the United States.
Mm. And so I guess for me, the question sort of arises is that what intended purpose would that have for, say, I don't want to say arguably, or I'm not going raw all in USA here, but I mean, like, for a hegemonic power like the United States, I mean, what do you see that being used for?
So the framework that I think is going to help try to give you the overview here is the outgoing regime, the GAE, this post World War II reconstruction. That's where you get the like Confessions of an Economic Hitman model, right? The IMF and the World Bank, and kind of this extortative, well, we're going to provide lending for development, but that the terms of repaying those loans means that we're going to have our thumb on the scale.
Neoliberal consensus, yeah.
And clearly Trump is walking back from that, the GAE is not sustainable, right? We can't be the world police. We can't be the singular, hyperpower. We're going to scale back into a multipolar world. But the PayPal mafia, which is, backing this regime change, one, they understand that the outgoing regime is not going to go quietly. They're going to go kicking and screaming. And so what does it really mean to replace them? And two, that nature abhors a vacuum. So what does the world look like if the United States leaves that, and how are we going to best be positioned going forward? If we where are we scaling it back to? And interestingly enough, China has kind of been the example of this. Now, China does not have natural resources that they're exporting. It's primarily actually for manufacturing, but they've been the model of, okay, if we can't beat the United States, how do we use an alternative model that we can still have some hegemonic power, at least over their region, if they can't do it on the scale that the United States does. And that seems to be the inspiration for a national sovereign wealth fund, and kind of where the United States with the incoming regime sees how it's going to exercise political power for the benefit of Americans living within the country. And that's where the sovereign wealth fund, I mean, you sort of see a very simplified basic version of that with tariffs as the cudgel. But I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. And the fact that they're announcing publicly that they're going to be doing this sovereign wealth fund backs up a lot, both to basically to buy out, or where the funding is coming from to exit the managerial regime of the outgoing regime, as well as then put themselves in an advantageous position to fulfill their promises, and then have that the ability to exercise these trade negotiations in a forceful way with the other countries that we're going to be working with. So again, it's the offensive realism thing.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second, because I want to say about 2 years ago, like the big talking point I heard from like JP Morgan analysts, and even like Chatham House, and even like the World Bank had talked exclusively about deglobalization. And it's not that that the world economy isn't going to go away as we know it, but there's going to be this renewed emphasis on a reduction of interdependence between countries. So like competition's back, and that we're going to try and see more rather international, trade and focus like that. It's going to be more exclusively on tighter regional trade agreements, and focusing on sort of like your regional partners rather than say like China or any other large international exporter or anyone that's willing to buy. And so, I mean, if you're, a large trading firm that works focused on international markets, that might not be so good for you. But if you're a smaller country that realizes that you're neighbors with a large trading partner, that might not be so bad. To me, it just seems like this is sort of that track record for deglobalization, or just like we're seeing a retrenchment globally. And I feel like Trump's actions are just sort of the louder, more boisterous version of that, as other nations try to look closer to their doorstep rather than just maybe the Straits of Malacca.
So I agree that this is nothing new, and this is kind of been the history of Friedrich List, and who came up with the National Political Economy is his famous book. Imperium Press has a copy of it out that they republished. And same thing when he first wrote it, is that it was not accepted, had to go to Germany. The Germans adopted it, and then the Americans saw how well it worked for Germany, and then they brought it back here. So I think what happened is, or same with like Kaizen's, this really classic example of something that was invented in the United States and then nobody was buying it here. So they take it to Japan. Japan implements it to great success. And then suddenly American firms are implementing Kaizen, not realizing that like it wasn't ever Japanese to begin with. So yeah, Trump seems to be the cheerleader for this. But as far as implementing an actual structure of focusing on a national economy as opposed to assuming a globalized economy where cost of labor is driven to zero, which again is Friedrich List's thing of between a mercantilist economy and an industrial economy. And I think this idea of we need, labor is the biggest cost in making anything. We got to drive those costs to be as minimal as possible, which means we're just going to export it to, the cheapest place in the third world to be able to get that labor. And then theoretically, Americans are going to be able to buy those cheap products. But the problem is that nobody's making any kind of income in the United States to be able to afford any of that anyway. So I think we're seeing a reorientation from looking in terms of capital appreciation and spreadsheet assets is kind of, I think, the outgoing mode as well, and more to how do we rediscover, firm competence and profitability. And part of that is having more of a national outlook of supporting domestic industry that can sustain itself, which again is what China's had to do as well. What do they call it? Dual circulation. That they realize that the United States is not going to be the buyer of all the Chinese exports for forever. And they're trying to bootstrap their own domestic economy to actually use the things that they make instead of just exporting it.
Gio, anything you have? Or are you just going to...
Yeah. Sorry. Well, the thing is, though, when it comes to various financial strategies, such as this sort of like emphasis on tariffs, I don't I don't know, maybe it's too much of a libertarian point, but like I don't see like if there is a sort of like lag on the sort of supply side, you know what I mean? Like in terms of domestic production, say in America, of steel and aluminum, that there is still producers in America of. But when it comes to sort of exporting goods in terms of the demand side, for example, like the American dollar being, for example, like at historic highs, to where like other nations literally can't afford such a high dollar. So I think like if you wanted a tariff to incentivize domestic production of, for example, hard commodities like steel and aluminum, uh, there's a problem in terms of like reindustrializing America, but also B, in terms of not just domestic consumption of those products, but internationally. Um, what incentivizes the rest of the world to start buying American steel or aluminum again if they really like literally cannot afford to do so? And also like the question of like price gouging of domestic producers that already can be like a smidgen below the tariff rate, but are still increasing the price of those commodities nevertheless. Like, how does Trump or any administration plan to sort of like curb um, a lot of these unforeseen consequences to like totally reshaping the financial order?
So I think so. Okay, so I think some of what you're saying is it is foreseen, and this has kind of been the knee-jerk reaction, right? Is tariffs, so prices are going to go up. Americans are already having a hard time. This is terrible. And sure, but we already have prices going up 30% through inflation because of the financialization of the manager regime. So if we're assuming basically you're going to pay 30% more no matter what, would you rather be paying 30% more because of inflation or because of the tariffs where, instead of the money being exported or going to U.S. aid, at least the money is going to growing a domestic company and hiring Americans to do a decent job? I think that's really the comparison that's being made. And I think so this goes back to Elon Musk did a Twitter space, I want to say about a week ago. I could probably pull up the tweet. And most people were like, oh, this is actually a pretty normie space. Nothing really important was said. But I think people missed the part where Elon really emphasized that he's trying to get basically the cost of borrowing through treasuries down. And in a very round, same way that Trump's talked about like putting a cap on credit card interest rates. And again, that on the
But Sean, my egg prices.
Right. Yeah. Short term. Right.
Well, that's more because of the fucking flu, right? Like
yeah, a lot of the blame has been on
Yeah.
bird flu. I'm having a fun time with liberals on Twitter.
So this is very similar, like Richard Werner's, if you're expanding the credit supply, it can go to one of three places. Either it's going to go to CapEx, where if it pays off, you're going to get deflation that offsets the inflation, or it can go to consumption, where just, the price of eggs and milk and whatever goes up, or it can go into asset speculation, which is where you have all-time highs in the S&P 500 or real estate, but all of that is like dead capital, and it kind of exacerbates a lot of like social inequality issues.
That's basically gambling too for corporations.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is what Friedrich List said as well. And actually it's like the American National School of Economics, which was the one that we used and had success with basically all the way into the 70s when all of this change and kind of neoliberalism took over. So this is, in many ways, like nothing new for us. It's just we've kind of forgotten because nobody remembers anything more than, 10 years ago. But okay, so the issue is how do you get down both the cost of borrowing and inflation? These are usually considered diametric things, especially in like a Keynesian model. And the way you do that is by actually increasing productivity. And I think that in some sense, that's kind of like a common sense thing. It's something that Elon is very focused on. But he really understands it in that deep way, in which I think means that his team and the people organizing this understand it as well. That's how you solve both of those problems. And that's what's actually going to make people feel better, as opposed to asset speculation, where, yeah, for boomers who are running the gerontocracy and living off of their IRAs and 401ks, these assets that they're just sitting on are at all-time highs and they feel richer than ever. But anybody else who actually has to earn an income, they've been stagnant for 20, 30, 40 years. and they feel like they can't get ahead, and they're basically giving up on life. So it's that split between capital appreciation domestically and income based that they're trying to correct. And yeah, look forward to when I discuss how doing an LBO accomplishes that, because it's actually pretty clever and it makes sense since like Trump is an 80s guy, and Elon basically just did exactly that with Twitter by getting financing from the Saudis. But in terms of a sovereign wealth fund, that's how that gets accomplished, both to implement policy goals of international trade. So it's more sophisticated and durable than necessarily tariffs are capable of. And it also helps act as like a stabilization fund and a way to provide that kind of incubator, which I think is kind of what you're getting at too, Gio, that how do you make that stable enough and predictable enough for a domestic industry to actually get bootstrapped? And it's the same way that like we did it once before and then we lost it. So now we have to build it back. And it's something that China just did. And that is the template of what works. So now it's a matter of redirecting everybody back into that model of, how do you actually get a structure that is based, an economic capital structure that is based on actual competence and productivity, as opposed to under the managerial regime or one of managed decline, it's just been, well, spreadsheet asset price goes up, but the real economy has been completely stagnant. And that's like a big talking point for us for the past 10 or 20 years, is like, drive your car anywhere or take a train ride and like look at the cities and look at the infrastructure, like everything's falling apart. So to look at the S&P 500, be like, oh, things are the best ever, does not reflect the reality on the ground.
Yeah, and but the thing is, like, I mean, does Trump essentially like have to go to Wall Street? Because I think like it's funny because people haven't like talked about the politics of Wall Street for years now, like since the Obama era. So does Trump essentially have to go to these people and say, listen, the empire is dying. We have to like let it live for like maybe a few more decades. What can we do? And if it means like sacrificing certain portfolio integers, like, are they willing to do that? Or is like, I mean, some people say, for example, like the social policies of certain corporations have capitulated to the Trump regime. But at the same token, I mean, you can't just switch off decades of both financial mismanagement, but also supporting like a managerial regime through various other means and just, expect them to bend the knee. So what could Trump like really do to like rein them in? And so also when it comes to like America's partners as well, I mean, maybe I'm just saying this because I'm a Canadian, but like, it doesn't really inspire.
Sorry, Gio.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where the sovereign wealth fund plays that role. And something to keep in mind with this too that I think is often lost sight of, because a lot of the normie media is talking about a sovereign wealth fund, and they're like, oh, it's like a hedge fund, but the government owns it. And it's like factual but not truthful, right? And maybe that's how they started, but how they've been politicized since the mid 2000s, especially when China booted up its CIC in 2008. And then they used that and their other organization, SAFE, which is like their international banking arm, to bootstrap the Belt and Road Initiative. And I think it's like 2013. Let's remember, going back to the managerial revolution, that basically capitalism died at the end of the 19th, early 20th century. As soon as we had a central bank and income tax, the idea that the world, and this kind of like neoliberal fantasy of, well, we basically have capitalism, but then we have some government regulations on top of that to make sure it doesn't get too crazy, is completely inverted. Managerialism is just soft communism. So we've always had a command economy, or basically what Lenin called the commanding heights, this entire time. Wall Street works at the behest of this managerial regime, especially since the 70s, with ERISA and boomers being the generation that absorbed the social experiment of absorbing the inflation that was being created by basically going off the gold standard and not letting and basically allowing those asset prices to absorb the excess inflation. And then they said, well, we'll worry about what happens when boomers start withdrawing instead of contributing down the road. And we're at that point now. So that's actually part of the domestic side too, without giving too much away on that, is how are boomers going to exit their position when none of the generations after them have the liquidity to be able to buy them out? There's just like a huge wall of inventory that nobody after them is going to be able to buy, and that's created a lot of intergenerational conflict as well. Running this sovereign wealth fund is going to be able to act as that market maker in order to facilitate that transition and basically be the heavy hand that gets Wall Street to go along with this. Part of that is we already have the preference cascade and kind of the vibe shift that we've seen already. But when the people who are actually crunching the numbers are looking at this, same way that all these feds and the CIA are being handed, like a pension or a retirement package. It's going to be the same kind of deal. We're going to have this sovereign wealth fund. It's going to be able to buy you out of these managerial positions. Don't worry, you're going to get your golden parachute, but you're out of power. If you can accept that peaceably, or you can become an enemy and incur the wrath of the new regime. Which way do you want to do it? And most people will retire quietly. And I think that's what's being rolled up now in order to, again, come back to what I was saying about you can't just kick out the old regime and then leave a vacuum. I think the PayPal mafia and the people behind Trump have spent at least 4 years thinking about this very carefully of what does that mean to actually do the circulation of elites, and this is the way they're doing it.
Well, it certainly seems like there's been, I feel like, at least in my perspective, the last 4 years with I don't even want to call it the Biden administration. For this 4 years of fog with this dementia patient at the helm. But like you had 4 years of basically unfettered gay race communists running things. And I mean, like the spigot was just turned all the way open. Like if there was ever an accelerationist 4 years, that was it. And I could see how someone like Mark Andreessen would go out of his way from voting Hillary Clinton in 2016, basically for immigration, to changing his position. Because as I've said on this show and other places, like the basic tenets of like, can the country exist as a functional, even like second class society, is being thrown into question in major parts of America's industry and economy, whether it's in New York or San Francisco, Los Angeles, etc. Like it's everywhere, Austin and Dallas, Fort Worth included. So, I mean, I can see why there's been a lot of time to think about 4 years of, well, how do we try and reverse course or try and get us in a position to maybe where when things get bad, the country, on this like magical spreadsheet of things, doesn't feel so bad when the crash does come tumbling down. But maybe to divert this a little bit, Sean, and also to get Gio in here as well. Have you noticed, Gio, the big sort of spat on the timeline between people like FBF and others about sort of like America in decline? Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's ongoing all the time, though.
No, I know it's ongoing all the time,
Yeah.
but I feel like in the question of money, this is also a fun time to bring this up because we're talking about like short-term pain or hurting or tariffs and wars. All these things are going to play a role in it because, like, FEF is looking at this purely in imperialistic terms, whereas people like myself or like Paul at Woman Definer, who's a great account, people really should follow him. Paul's great.
Yeah, cosign.
Yeah, absolutely. Primo content. He's the one who always brings up the Caleb Hammer videos on my timeline, which is so good. If you want a red pill on finance, go watch him and then just start noticing things. You'll thank me later. So, I mean, like I was joking about the price of eggs earlier, and I mean, that's mainly due to bird flu. It's not due to like Trump's economic policies. And even if it was, he's been in office for like 3 fucking weeks. The thing that sticks out in my mind is that debate about like the internal health of the American people and the American economy, because as we've all witnessed, most jobs went to non-citizens and non-Americans. And now we have this administration that is sort of, I don't want to say de facto, but has basically white shifted the pocketbook issues. Like this is, and of course it's towards Trump's base, which is white people. So I mean the question becomes like, how does this affect the voter base that typically has been, as long as I've been alive, and I'm sure as long as you've been alive, Sean, shafted by the very people that claim to represent them?
Okay, I want to be careful I don't give away too much that I already promised to Burden, but to answer that question, one of the questions that people asked me pretty much as soon as this sovereign wealth fund got announced is, was that going to be what then funds, creating infrastructure and jobs for Americans here? like the CHIPS Act or something to that effect. The short answer is, yeah, I think that's kind of where they're going with that. And so the way to think of that, what people have to keep in mind is when the state is running a fund, nominally when it was for excessive returns, like from a resource, it was, well, we just want to invest it someplace where we get better than, like, CD rates or something, basically. But it really is not meant as a function for markets the way that, like, you or I would invest. It's much more closer to like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve or how open market operations works for treasuries. There's going to be political targets or desirable political outcomes that are then going to be achieved through market operations, basically the same way that like cornering a market works. And that's also how interest rates are set. Every time a president tries to fudge the price of gas because they want to get reelected or for political reasons, they mess with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This really isn't anything new. It's just that, well, now we're going to be comprehensive about it. So how are these policy decisions, both domestically and foreign, going to be enacted? It's going to be through the management of those assets that are traded internationally to hit those points where we want them to be to achieve the outcomes that we want. And that is how, which is also exactly how China does it. And we do it, we have 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles because surprisingly, the automotive industry still has enough political power that they could say, hey, we don't want, open competition from China with them. We're trying to preserve our domestic auto market. And it gets kind of blurry too because, the Japanese and they just create factories here, which is what we want to bypass those kinds of tariffs. And more of that is basically where this is headed, is that it's much more responsive, much more agile, all the kind of stuff you would think you would hear from like a big tech Mark Andreessen kind of guy. That's how sovereign wealth funds are able to target things much more efficiently than you get from like messing with the interest rate at the Fed or trying to enact, regulatory changes, or, the other methods are usually much more clumsy and much slower. When you do it through kind of that Yarvin CEO King method of whoever is managing the funds at this national sovereign wealth fund, that's how they're going to be able to tailor it in order to achieve those economic targets, especially at like a sector or policy level that they're seeking to get.
Yeah, but like the auto industry, like that's a delicate balance. Like, for example, say if like Trump is actually serious about these tariffs on Mexico and Canada, there's so much industry and like so many parts that fly between American manufacturers and producers and Canadian and Mexican ones, that there are people like within the auto industry that say, well, basically it could potentially crash the car industry in North America, that you would have to like pay for $100,000 for like a clunker or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not. And also like, I'm skeptical of the extent to which, like, for example, Trump saying he could utilize various resources like oil, as opposed to like Canadian or Saudi sources or wherever, or maybe like even more like corrupt countries like Venezuela. Like, I think that in a weird, like, I understand like the logic of sort of like short-term pain for long-term gain, but I think like it's sort of like America like collapsing the economic prospects of Europe. It's like, well, it's to keep them in line, but like if you kind of fuck them over, then you're not going to have like, I mean, barring the geopolitical issues, but just in terms of markets themselves, you know what I mean? Like, I think that if you
in order for America to have cheap
right?
energy, it means that energy has never been more expensive in Germany, and that's also because Germany has mismanaged their energy production.
Yeah, true. But then again, there's also like other, geopolitical realities that have like pushed them over the edge. Not to say like I'm a big fan of like the German government, but I just like, but the auto industry example, I think like, how could you potentially get over the fact that, there's a huge network of trade between these three nations and more. And if you're going to implement tariffs and use the sovereign wealth fund to your advantage, then I don't know. Like, I think that I hate to say it, but like a lot of these things are kind of complicated by globalization and just the inherent interconnectedness of markets in the world. And so, you know what I mean, Sean? I think like I'm sounding like a total skeptic, but it is to play devil's advocate. Like there is concerns, I think, with like this approach. I mean, it does scare the shit out of people, obviously, and maybe
Right,
like
because
yeah.
that's often a criticism of and kind of why there's been managed decline for so long is a lot of
Mm.
people have better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Or Machiavelli has that famous quote of like people are very slow to a new way of doing things. So if you think you're gonna like remove the leader and take over, and you're looking for supporters to help you do that coup, you're going to find very few supporters just because, like, well, you don't have it yet, and the risks are very high for doing a coup. Whereas the current guy is in charge now. That's the safe bet. Most people, if they're in power, they stay in power. The changeover is less likely than not. Which again, I think is what the counter elites who have now successfully taken over have thought about very carefully. And basically in that kind of selectorate theory way, how do they make good on their promises of like, okay, you backed us. Most other people didn't. Now, how do we reward our friends and punish our enemies? And as far as structuring, so yeah, I think the other side of that too is things, and much like the inflation conversation as well, it was going to be managed decline otherwise. So part of that leverage buyout thesis is, and if you look at how leverage buyouts were done in the 80s, and that's kind of a hint of where that conversation is going to be going when I'm on Burden's show, but it's risky because you're taking on a ton of debt, and basically you're promising that if you cut out all the fat and dead wood and can turn the business around and make it super productive, you're going to be that amount of debt that you're taking on is very manageable. But if you can't do that successfully, if the leadership change is not effective in being so overpowered as a result of those changes, you're going to drown in debt. So your choice is between you have a managed decline for maybe a century or two, but your destination is known that you're going to collapse no matter what. Or do you risk it now and say, okay, maybe we completely blow up and we're screwed, or we pull it off and we get to where we want to be? And that second way of looking at the world is how every entrepreneur and founder of a business has thought about it, that they risk their whole life savings in an idea that everybody thinks they're crazy. But if they manage to pull it off, then they look like geniuses. And out of anybody in the world, Elon has been that guy who's done that, 3 or 4 times now. Of everybody thought there's no, to create a new car company, to make rockets reusable and affordable. All these things, and all the naysayers were like, yeah, you're never going to be able to pull that off. And I think it's Thiel in one of his interviews was like, yeah, I would never bet against Elon. As crazy as all of his ideas seem, he pulls out, or buying out Twitter. Everybody's like, oh, it's halved in value and it's going to crash. And honestly, a lot of that was probably about like tax management than it was about like the actual valuation of a privately held business. But he's got a great track record and he's pulled it off. And the action so far in the counter elites making good on the promises and implementing the changes necessary in order to reward their friends and punish their enemies has been playing out. It seems like they seriously have thought about this, and they are doing the things necessary in order to secure their new regime and successfully retire the old regime with a minimal amount of backlash. And that does mean that the scary, that we're deglobalizing. It is going to be a multipolar world. United States will be competing with China. How maybe Mexico and Canada are plugged into that. I think all the cards haven't been played yet either. A lot of this is negotiations and like art of the deal type of stuff. But what they are trying to do is get across to these other heads of state who have been members of the World Economic Forum and these other, kind of under the old regime that like, I am the captain now kind of messaging, and getting that across first has to be done before any of the boring logistics stuff can get taken care of.
Well, sorry, Prue, do you want to do?
Well, no, I see where Sean's coming from. Like the deglobalization stuff, I thought was sort of inevitable after everyone realized that the world economy that we loved prior to 2020 was gone. At least when it came to like supply chain issues, because there's so much. As someone who works in like procurement in local government with administration of money, it is insane how expensive things are. And this was the first, and I've been working with like government grants and procurement of like everything from fleet vehicles to construction materials for about, I want to say, about 5 years, 6 years now. And, this is the first time I can remember in recent memory where I went to a project pre-construction meeting and everything was under budget. Now, this is the first time in like 5 years, which feels crazy to say out loud. But I mean, again, it's the post-COVID world. That's how things are. And again, my boss and I were just like, oh my gosh, this is so great. I don't have to go anywhere else for money. And, but at the same time, I think about how like that's sort of an inevitability because one, war is still back on the table. We saw that in 2022. We saw it in 2014. We've seen this elsewhere in the world. And not to mention the Houthis happened. Then you have some concerns about the Straits of Malacca. And now this whole Panama Canal business, like vital, important international trade routes are back on the discussion for trade and debate and defense. I think that the big concern for me geopolitically is the fact that Canada unfortunately gets fucked by the nature of China's influence on the country. And I think that that's just like a foregone conclusion. Sorry. But you look at what China has been doing, both in Canada with mining, but also their heavy investments into the lithium triangle in South America. And I've got a very old geopolitics lecture on that. For those that are longtime fans of the show, they'll remember that discussion. I also had it with Radical Liberation on his channel. And so like I see that Trump is trying to like, how do I like entrench financially so I can project power through my own internal
to implement the Don Road doctrine. Yeah, I think that's the thing is how do we compete with what China has successfully done with Belt and Road and CIC and their sovereign wealth fund to beat them at their own game? Yeah, particularly in our neighbors in North and South America.
And that's kind of how I see it. I suppose it's gonna. And again, this is why, like, on one hand, I see where it's going because this is about imperial health, not so much national. Although I feel like, while Don and his cavalcade of advisors and those that have backed him are pushing for that, JD Vance is like the soft, underhanded, touch on the shoulder to remind you that like it's the American flag, baby. Like I saw his. I listened to his remarks earlier today at lunch. At the AI summit in France. And I mean, it was very much a staunchly protectionist kind of like American worker first, which makes him sound like a very old style Democrat, which I'm not necessarily opposed to at all. In fact, it's a breath of fresh air coming from a Republican. So I'm not really opposed to it. It's just I'm with Gio on the fact that like I'm very skeptical because
well, that's what I mean. Like
5 minutes ago, these people were definitely not on anything that I would consider "quote unquote" my side.
Yeah, no, but that's what I mean. Like I think like the problem is that the way people are talking about it is, first of all, how shall I say this? Number one would be, is there actually a culmination of a viable quote unquote counter elite in Silicon Valley in the PayPal mafia? Secondly, there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, they have ulterior motives. Thirdly, there's other geopolitical realities, like you were saying, war is on the table. Now, I personally think that, for example, if Trump is very serious about basically kicking out the Palestinians and building Gaza-Lago, that could spark another war. I mean, maybe those fucking useless Arabs won't be so useless anymore. You know what I mean? So I think like a lot of people are talking about the Trump administration as if there's already imperial rule, but all of this shit in terms of a long-term vision could get erased when a Democrat comes into power again in maybe 4 to 8 years. So I think like that's just the problem that Western quote unquote, I mean, it's not democracy, but you know what I mean? Like Western quote unquote democracies have, as opposed to China or even India under Modi or, well, Russia under Putin, where they have command economies that have very explicit visions that are run by very explicit leadership classes. Whereas in America, I think in Canada, in the Anglosphere, in a lot of European countries, there is a ruling elite. There definitely is a managerial state. But in terms of the function and the direction, there's a lot of like wild cards in terms of where things could go. So how can like Trump and JD Vance, unless JD Vance becomes the heir apparent, how do they like really secure their vision of like this America first, dealing with a multipolar world sort of deal? Whereas like a Democrat could come into power again and just basically make everything illegal like it was under Obama and Biden, and we're fucked. And well, I mean,
Yeah,
Canada's fucked anyway. So when I mean we, I mean you guys, not me. I'm already fucked. But I mean like Americans, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's it's the demoralization campaign has been very effective, and I completely understand why people are skeptical. I think that question is exactly why they've been so aggressive and calculating and thorough of rooting out a lot of that managerial state and replacing it with their own people. And the sovereign wealth fund is one piece of that puzzle. Because they need to be able to reward their friends and punish their enemies. So, and they're taking, I think, that prospect very seriously because they learned from the failures of the 2016 Trump's first regime that if you bring in a lot of compromised people, it's not going to fly, and they're totally going to sandbag and subvert you. And with dismantling U.S. aid and now going after the Pentagon and the Treasury, they're going after the power of the purse in order to root out that patronage network, ultimately to then replace it with their own. And they can't replace it with the same thing. The right can't copy the left either. It doesn't work that way, right? But I think the way that they're then going to reward all of the autistic Bill Fosters out there who, the engineers who make missiles to defend America and have been told for 30 years that they're the bad guy, that they're going to get the job, or like the Lucky Palmers out there, right? The people who on a smaller scale have been funded through Peter Thiel's Founders Fund, that they're going to get those opportunities because that's what a sovereign wealth fund domestically is going to be able to buy them the short, which again is exactly what China did in their domestic market. It's also how anytime they had to do like their bank bailouts or stock market bailouts, they used
Sean.
Yep.
I totally forgot. But this is just for the listeners. We're almost an hour in. Can you explain? This sounds like a stupid fucking question, but like, explain to the best of your ability, like pretend like people are stupid. Our audience is not stupid.
Pretend like I am a very small, retarded, inanimate object.
Right. Yeah. Like, what is a sovereign wealth fund?
What is a sovereign wealth fund? How does it work? How does it get implemented?
I apologize for not covering that in the beginning.
No,
it's
our fault, Sean. It's our fault. Don't worry about it.
It's our fault. We're the interviewers.
Okay. So as I began to touch on that, the way that gets pitched in the media is, it's like a hedge fund, but the government runs it. So the way this idea started was countries that had massive amounts of oil wealth, they wanted to find a way to invest it, but they wanted to avoid like there's something called the hot money problem as well, that like when there's a sudden influx of a lot of money, it's very disruptive to an economy. And it tends to crowd everything out. So sovereign wealth funds are how the resource curse gets contained. It's basically, it is a government run investment platform where they're going to choose where that money gets deployed and in what kind of investments. Some of that is about that they want good return on their investments. On the domestic side, I think that's going to mean that they're going to be able to bear the risk that a lot of private investment right now doesn't want to. As an aside, that kind of gets into the whole problem of the economy shifting from dividends and profitability to asset speculation and capital appreciation. I think they're trying to reverse that with this project. And part of that is political, which is also what the Chinese have done, that they're cherry picking certain sectors, or it's so that they can enact their own foreign policy or to get favorable trade deals with the third world for mineral rights or energy or so on. So it's also an arm, and which is kind of what I want to cover, especially with the two of you, that, if we don't have U.S. aid and, maybe even like
US
the CIA, or that, confessions of an economic hitman, the IMF and the World Bank and the World Economic Forum to enforce the GAE politics on the world. How is America going to do that? How are we not going to get totally like screwed over, taken advantage of? Or, we don't want to be in a weaker position. We want to be in a stronger position. And the sovereign wealth fund is the way that gets done. That's how, more than just tariffs, we're going to be able to target global price levels. Just like when we started fracking in order to screw over the Saudis because they're totally dependent on oil revenues. Or like the whole reason we made that Faustian bargain with the Saudis to begin with, to drive down the price of oil against the Soviet Union because they were dependent on oil. Well, this was really in the 80s. Like the reason why like gas was 80 cents
Oh,
a
you mean
gallon
like
in the
post
80s.
OPEC? Yeah, post OPEC.
Yeah, basically it was a known CIA thing with Reagan's blessing that we're going to make a deal with the Saudis to flood the global oil market, which is going to drive down prices to rock bottom. We made assurances to them that like, well, we're going to sell you a bunch of weapons and you're going to be a regional power, the fifth largest army, I think. But you know, the Soviet Union at the time also, they were the only ones that had the same amount of oil reserves as Saudi Arabia. They're the two largest in the world. And because ever since collectivization of farming, they've been totally dependent on food imports because they could never unfuck themselves from the damage done of Stalin's collectivization. It was never like politically possible, nor just like technical difficulties. Khrushchev tried doing that by expanding the amount of places they could farm and saying he's going to grow corn and, you know, try to turn around, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't work out. And basically,
Lysenkoism was also a big problem as well.
Right. Yeah. But as a result, there were food shortages. You know, the grocery stores were bare. People were waiting in lines. And that's basically what got their a bloodless capitulation in 1991 of like, they're at the point where like, okay, we're going to have riots because we can't feed our people. We give up. And we did that through economic change as opposed to kinetic force. It was a brilliant way to end the Cold War. So, you know, we have some track record of doing these sorts of things. We primarily see it through oil and like petrodollars or whatever. But, you know, the whole realm of international trade, if we give up, you know, or disperse with the outgoing regimes, you know, globalist, soft communism, you know, international communism kind of like mentality of, you know, like a one world market, you know, that's just going to be free trade through everywhere. And say, no, we're going to have competing nation states. We're all trying to work for our own advantage. But if there's cases where it's mutually advantageous for us to work together, we'll do that. But that's an ongoing offensive realist negotiation. You know, sometimes you're friends and sometimes you're enemies. And it depends on what's actually going to help your country and your countrymen accordingly, which is also, again, an older idea. It's how the United States ran from, you know, the late 1700s until like 1912 or something like that. We're just kind of going back to that because the managerialist experiment that focuses on capital appreciation instead of competency and profitability, and you know, which List calls the industrial system as opposed to the mercantile system or the, you know, the merchant system. That's the one that actually improves quality of life for people. That's the one where increased technology, investing in sciences, making things actually better through you know, real capitalism and a real fight to improve things makes things better, as opposed to just playing these spreadsheet games of like, well, number goes up, but you know, we're living in the pod and eating the bugs.
Well, and for those who know, like a hedge fund is where a there's like a very limited financial portfolio and like a hedge fund hanging it. They like what's the term I remember researching? They vigorously manage that portfolio and make deals.
They have the agile ability to change investment decisions both on the information that they receive as well as you know, whatever, like maybe political realities or circumstances.
Or the billionaire that's paying you just happens to like fucking some computer chip that morning, and so you have to like, you know what I mean? Like you have to buy and sell. Like there's constraints in hedge funds, if I recall, right?
Well, it depends on like their investment thesis and basically like how they're arranged. I'm sure there's going to be some necessary you know, bureaucracy. So that there's
you push Wabistics. You push. you know that's Sopranos reference shot.
Right.
Yeah, Wabistics. Yeah.
So what was it? So they have something called the Santiago Principles, because at first, you know, the kinds of countries that were doing this were sort of like the Singapores or you know, the Arab absolute monarchies, right? So there was like a lot of like skepticism from Europe and Americas, also because it's basically rivalrous too. That, you know, Bretton Woods post-World War II Washington consensus model of like America's going to foot the bill for everybody else to develop, and in return we're going to be able to buy their stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now the thing, okay, so the thing that the key difference though between if you have a private hedge fund like, you know, Axe Capital, where their goal is they're trying to make money for their investors. You know, people put money in, they're then going to deploy that capital in a way that is hopefully going to be profitable, and then those profits are going to be available to people who made that investment. in theory, that's how this started. Again, with these countries where they just had, the Dutch disease or resource curse, where they just had like so much money that they didn't know what to do with it. And if they actually brought it into the country, their economy proper, it would blow it up. So they need to deploy it outside their country in some way that's going to get some kind of reasonable return. And then also the payouts are going to be in a more measured way. Maybe it would be like a pension fund or something, something, or like an investment vehicle, which again, for us, hey, how are we going to fund? Where is the money going to come from? One, to buy out Wall Street, basically. These people who've been part of the managerial regime and have these balance sheets that say, hey, I own all these assets of zombie capital that on paper are worth billions or trillions of dollars. I don't expect to lose that. If this new incoming regime comes in, I don't want to just be appropriated of that value on paper. And two, how do you actually bootstrap these domestic industries to to be protected from the competition enough and to have like venture capital, right? So in that, which again is very similar to what Elon's done his whole life, the PayPal mafia, Peter Thiel with his founders fund. They're just doing that at a national scale is how they're thinking of it. So they have the track record there. But yeah, that's that. In order to answer the question of what is a sovereign wealth fund, it is like a venture capital fund or a hedge fund, but it's run by a state, and it is not purely for pure profit motive, but it's also to achieve desired political outcomes, which is, or part of the political economy, as Friedrich List called it.
Wasn't USAID basically that though, but for like the global homo? Like it,
Yeah, that's the comparison I made too. Yeah, so the difference there though, part of the managerialist regime, which is it's basically our version of the nomenclatura, and the reason we've had our version of the Brezhnev stagnation for the past 20, 30 years is because under that managerialist regime, they just need the stock price to go up in order for the owners to leave them alone and make a mess of things. Like the owners weren't complaining that, they're the managers, like the C-suite. The C-suite can use the money from increasing stock price in order to buy loyalty from the people under them, like the keys to power in the selectorate theory sense, in order to secure their position. And they're not technically the owners; they're temporary. After 10 or 20 years, they get their golden parachute, and a new guy comes in. But the structure itself is ostensibly permanent. Just like if it was like a state-run oil industry or state-run farming industry or whatever. In America, we just do a softer, slightly smaller version of that with like the S&P 500. So, all these publicly traded major companies, same difference. But they didn't actually have to be profitable. They could do stock buybacks. They were getting lines of credit because they're juiced into the regime. Thus, they had no incentive to actually be productive. I don't want to give away why in a leveraged buyout there's a way to force them to be productive and basically demand results. So look forward to that when I'm on Burden's show. But it solves that problem of how do you align, basically the principal agent problem, right? How do you get the managers to actually want the business to succeed as opposed to just being a tick or a parasite sucking the lifeblood out until they're full and then they fall off? And that's what we've had for 30 years. That's why things have been stagnant, is because that money has gone to asset speculation and just making stock price go up. But they haven't had any incentive to actually be profitable, competent, productive with that capital structure. And I think that's one, in a true believer sense, something that kind of really pisses off somebody like Elon Musk, who really does have an interest in making the world a better place. He wants to go to Mars. He's like, if we can't figure out this stuff, we're never going to get there. And two, it's the only solution in that Richard Werner sense of how do you both reduce inflation, how do you get deflation to offset the inflation, and reduce the cost of borrowing. So how do you have more capital available, which lowers interest rates, and not have a problem of inflation? And it's that the capital that you have has to be more productive relative to the supply of money and credit. And the way you do that is by actually getting people to be more productive. And that's basically the idea behind the leverage buyout as well. It's very similar to in the 1970s, we had the stagflation, and then you had Michael Milken come in with junk bonds. And that was able to fund these people who said, hey, if I take over this company, take it private, don't have to deal with the shareholders, I have a free reign to run the company however I want. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut out all the dead wood, like shutting down USAID, and organize what's left that's actually going to be productive. And same thing that Elon did in taking Twitter private and turning it into X as well.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, Prude, you've been quiet for a little bit.
I've been listening. I've been listening to Sean make his case, and I'm probably just as skeptical, Gio, just because I don't fucking trust these people.
Well, no, I'm skeptical of the. I know that we all had our libertarian phases. Mm-hmm. I was a Rothbardian when I was in high school, but I kind of skeptical of running a government as the same way you would run a corporation. I know that's like the basic neo-cameralist point that even like libertarians like Rothbard would make, mm-hmm. but there's a lot of externalities there, such as, for example, I know like a lot of conservatives, they pool this together, but for example, unfunded liabilities and Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of things that the American government promises, could that potentially stave off a future financial crisis when it comes to, for example, all the boomers needing healthcare and dying off all at once? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's kind of more complex. I don't know. Like, I guess the critique of like trying to run the government like a business, that's always been sort of like the alchemical stone of like conservatives everywhere. And I think maybe Trump, maybe that's the most honest attempt with Doge. And well, Prue, what do you think? What are you going to say?
Well, for instance, I feel like we're just kind of living in Newt Gingrich's wet dream, in the sense that like what we're finally getting is like what 90s Republicans really wanted, which was we're gonna reform the tax code and we're gonna just slash a shitload of budgets. And don't get me wrong, like I think now is probably the best time you could have ever done that, because they spent like what $775 million on a federal advisory commission in the 90s to try and slash and reduce the budgets. They managed to reduce like the federal budget by like $4 billion. And this was something that Yarvin was writing about. Although he did get it wrong, because he had said that like Trump was, or that Doge would be like a federal advisory committee. They just took over like U.S. Digital Services and had it renamed, and U.S. Digital Services came out as a way to deal with the launch and advent of Obamacare during the Obama administration. I want to say like 2011 or so. And of course, there's still a lot of things that get done very analog style that I'm sure that Elon would love to take his hands on and fix. I think that sometimes when they say like when a lot of lefties or even like European commentators call Musk prime minister, I don't necessarily think they're wrong, just by the way that he acts and the way that he does things. Although I have to give Susan Wiles a shitload of credit for keeping some distance between Doge and Trump and letting them go through her first. So I mean, good on Susie for that. I guess my skepticism about all of this is just going to be the same thing I feel like everyone said before when it comes to these things. Like, well, I've been hurt before, and I don't mean to sound like very womany or feminine about it, but it's just like,
fool me once, shame on you.
Well, I know, yeah, well, that, but also it's just like, come on, like no one in their right mind, right wing or left wing, who has more than a couple of brain cells between their ears is going to be like, yeah, I don't really trust you. Are you better than what came before? Yes, absolutely. And I am full on board with that. But again, it goes back to the whole like devil you know versus the devil you don't. And I don't know this devil very well, other than Elon Musk is a very good manager for what he does, but he is probably the greatest market manipulator of our time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally not discounting that. I think this is a huge opportunity for. So same way in taking over X and getting these other government contracts, I'm sure kind of what the PayPal mafia is thinking is, oh, but we'll be the ones who run this sovereign wealth fund, right? Why do it on this small private scale? Think of the power and money we could make if we run it at a national scale. And I'm sure some version of that is what they're thinking and how they're going to enrich themselves. And, the question is, would they do a good enough job? Would the world be a better place? Would we actually be productive? And then that would be a just reward. And I'm sure Russia went through the same thing with like the oligarchs, or Putin then reining in the oligarchs, right? I mean, it's a circulation of elites. We're not getting rid of the elites.
He gave them a choice.
Yeah. Right. In order to run a productive economy that can, defend itself and be a player on the world stage. And I think, that's the attitude that they're bringing to this is, yeah, it benefits them. I don't think this is purely selfless or, purely out of like patriotic duty and love of country. But those interests happen to align because they need America to be productive. And it also happens that America being productive again, instead of just stagnant and printing paper wealth on spreadsheets, is the way to solve these entrenched problems of stagnation that we've been having for several decades as well. But it's a gamble. I mean, it's I think that's the part that it's, yeah, because it's a devil you don't know. It's an entrepreneurial risk. Either they pull it off or the system blows up. And the people who've been running government before are managers who play it safe and were managing the decline and were never interested in taking those kinds of risks. And now we've got a bunch of founders running things saying like, no, let's go for it. And yeah, it is an open question. Can they pull it off? The only thing I can say in terms of, trying to approach answering that is, well, Elon seems like he's got a good track record, which is basically how every investment works.
Yeah. But I have to mention this because Northern Observer made some good points in the chat, and I have to do like my country has this Canadian content thing where I have to like 20% of my content has to be Canadian focused. So he said, I guess this is playing devil's advocate, but he makes some good points. Putting Canada outside of the American industrial tent is one hell of a backstab. It's not as if Canada didn't suffer after NAFTA. I remember that because my two uncles were working for GM at the time, and it was not good. But Trump lies in our face and says the U.S. paid all the costs. This is a lie. Basically, we competed fair and square after NAFTA. We organized our industries, and we, more or less were in keeping with American demands. Our reward is being treated like the CCP. This is betrayal. Canada is not Mexico. We are not re-exporting Chinese imports. So cut us some fucking slack. If it ends up being a negotiating target, okay. But if you strip Canada of jobs and investment, then, well, what are you going to do? No, I think that's a great point. Like there is, I get like the patriotic sentiment. Like if you look at it from the perspective of an American, and if you look at it from the perspective of like, okay, there has been for the past 9 years a semi-hostile regime to Trumpian interests in Canada. But at the same time, there is a lot of like economic blowback there. I mean, with Mexico, it's kind of like I have no sympathy for Mexico because, like, let's face it,
I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, they were the ones that were first to deindustrialize.
Like no offense to Hugo Gloss who donates to this chat, but like I'm the old like crab octopus tentacle monster from Monsters Inc. Like I don't care how many Mexicans have to suffer before I let this country die. Like I'm at that level for what kind of economic warfare we're willing to do. Canada, no, I think that Northern Observer's got a fair like objection. It's just like, well, yeah, it sucks that this probably fucks you guys over more the most, and that's certainly not fun or fair in terms of national competition, but also that when I think so, and again, I don't want to play devil's advocate for the Canadians either, because I think that Canada should be its own sovereign, independent entity of an Anglo-French background and heritage that should be its own respective thing. And I agree heavily with George Grant that the Americanization of Canada is a great national tragedy. However, you and I are both equally fucked when it comes to immigration, and also we both. It's an open secret between the Indians and the Chinese about how easy it is to buy off members of parliament. Would iron sharpen iron and force a more nationalist sentiment that forces you guys to address some of these issues? Maybe. What pisses me off to no end is that all these libtards, both in America with like the civil service, like r/Fed News, and even in Canada, like it's rally around the flag patriotism when it's against like Trump and not against actual existential enemies. Like, I don't know, millions of Indians or Chinese embezzlement. And yeah, it's the same thing in America. We have the same problem.
Well, that's what I mean. Like a lot of people, like Sean was alluding to this, like a lot of people, they say that the Chinese offer a better deal. I mean, this is certainly like the rhetoric of like, you know, third worldists or like multipolarity people, that like China offers the third world, be it in Africa or South America or other parts of Asia, although all those people are skeptical of the Chinese, obviously. that they offer a better deal because it's non-ideological and it doesn't impose as many conditions. But that's kind of like not true, because just by the very nature of a civilization state, you're going to inevitably impose some of your ideas. Like, for example, the Chinese, maybe they do it. I'm not going to be subject to a lawsuit. I'm allegedly, not, I have no proof of this, but, you know, people like Jackson Hinkle or Hawes or whoever, like, you know, promoting some fucking clown like Julius Malema to go like, you know, kill the poor, the farmer, right? Shoot to kill. Like, the Chinese obviously have an investment in propping up various like third world leaders that can fuck over old world powers, but at the same time create economic favorabilities towards Chinese industries. That in itself is an ideological export. Now, the West, of course, is the worst at that in terms of like actually, you know, like unless you have funding of trans surgeries in Peru, then you're not going to get certain benefits. That's very explicit, right? And we've all seen the leaks, the sort of US grids thing. But at the same time, I mean, all these powers do it. Like, I mean, Russia certainly imports their own vision of the world to its various subsidiaries, be it Belarus or other places in Eastern Europe. So I think like a lot of like third worldist and multipolarity people, they're looking at this as like, well, it's basically what the Washington machine realizing what time it is. But then you have other people like, you know,
instead of trying to trans your kid. Yeah, when China does it, they're not trying to trans your kids. But you know, the prefab factories to manufacture parts, you know, the protocols that they use to do that are all Chinese protocols. All the, you know, methodology, all the units of measurement or whatever is whatever the Chinese use. I mean, they're going to export how they know how to do things. In fact, a lot of the time China is exporting its male labor too, because it has a massive imbalance between men and women due to the single child policy. So yeah, I mean, it is going to be some advantage for, you know, the more hegemonic power compared to the client state. But it's a little more of a business negotiation and transactional as opposed to ideological. Yeah, I think you're right about that. You know, your other point too, you know, is Kissinger right that, you know, to be an enemy of America is dangerous, but to be its friend is deadly? Or ask how Japan went with the Louvre and Plaza Accords, where basically blew up their economy because they were getting a little too big for their britches. Yeah, I imagine that could happen with Canada and Mexico. Some of it just might be, I don't know, negotiation. Maybe we're going to get better terms on importing your lumber and your tar sand oil. I mean, I don't necessarily have the inside scoop on where specifically the Trump regime wants to go with this, other than, you know, this idea of, you know, turning you into a colony or, you know, a
subsidiary,
you know, a territory of the United States, right? But yeah, I think a lot of that is just a matter of negotiation. And if anything, the meta signal there is, again, yeah, that it's not ideological, that this is strategic. And what we're really looking out is for American interests, which is a more honest signal, right? You know, we're not telling you we're doing it to make you better people or, you know, the new Soviet man or whatever. You know, we're saying, well, we want to do it because we want to survive.
Yeah, that is a more honest arrangement. But I think the counterpoint that people like Niccolo Sala would say is that, well, this whole like multipolarity thing is like a fantasy, and actually the empire is still more or less going to wither the storm of Trump, and like who knows what's going to happen in the 20. What's the next decade, Prude?
The 30s.
No, the next, like, okay, we're in the 2020s, right?
Yeah.
Next one's the 2030s.
That's the next decade. Yeah.
3 follows 2. Yeah.
That sounds like, you know, it's like, I know I'm terrible. When I see numbers, my brain.
Did you shove it in the mental locker?
Yes. No, okay. But that sounds like so sci-fi. We're gonna live in the 2030s.
Man,
like
2020
you know?
Sounds sci-fi to me.
Yeah,
the 2010s was like when Blade Runner supposedly takes
like place. Blade Runner happened in 2019, right? Yeah. Like, come on.
Yeah. I think
like every great Philip K. Dick story takes place in like these decades.
What about 420? I mean, the 400s. That's like Warhammer 40K, right?
No, that's 40,000.
Yeah.
The year 40,000.
Year 40,000. Yeah.
We're not even at Dune time of 10,000 years after, you know, the jihad or whatever.
Yeah, we're so far from that scale.
Yeah.
we are closer. We're in the middle of the eugenics wars, according to the Star Trek timeline. If you wanted to go with that, which is remember, Star Trek is a post-apocalyptic fiction. I feel like billions must die if you want your gay space communism.
Maybe we can have like hive cities where people become like human rats. You know, like Kowloon Walled City times a billion. Maybe we could do that. That would be fun.
We have a whole
like,
continent for that.
We have a continent. Yeah, it's called. Yeah, it's true.
You have a whole subcontinent for that. Like, well, sir, that exists.
Yeah, but you're not gonna have like the Black Templars or like the Astartes. Like, it's not sexy and violent. As,
oh, dude, we're all in the
40K.
40K timeline. We're just picking what faction.
We're gonna get Space Marines soon. That's gonna be the Trump military revamp. We're gonna have match suits, and the soldiers are gonna download their consciousness. I watched like one video on Warhammer 40K, and now I'm like obsessed with it. I don't know. Maybe if I didn't discover pro wrestling as a chud kid, like I probably would have been like a Warhammer nerd, you know. But anyways, what were you saying?
So
what?
The skepticism of can they actually facilitate regime change, right? Is it a true circulation of elites? Because they're not going to go quiet,
right?
And I think you have every reason to be skeptical of that. It's, you know, is it like tipping over a soda machine? You know, you got to rock it a couple of times before it actually goes over. Maybe I'm just, you know, high on copium or something, but every move that's been made so far, and especially in the past couple weeks that they've had the power, it seems like, you know, every day is Christmas. So if this is a tempo in the OODA loop that they can sustain for 4 years, and in the same time watching the Democratic Committee where they're tripling down on, you know, black, female, gay communism as the only thing they can think of, yeah, sure. Then 8 years of JD Vance after, you know, these years of Trump. And especially I think that what they're trying to do is rip out the managerial state and replace it with their own people and their own way of doing things to, again, politically reward friends and punish enemies within these 4 years, because they know they've at least got these 4 years. In fact, I think they're trying to do it in these 2 years because they've got the mandate now and the total control politically of everything. But if there's an upset in the election in the House,
yeah,
you know, that can change the dynamic. And again, that's what Elon has hinted at. He runs his mouth, and he doesn't realize he runs his mouth. I mean, I did that here today too. I'm like, well, I don't really want to get into these details, and then I kind of like give away half the details I was trying to hold on to. But because you get excited about the ideas, right?
Yeah.
And talk about how, you know, they're changing the budget, ripping out the money, which is the support system of, you know, the enemy regime. And then they're going to be able to install their own systems to provide patronage to the people who supported them. You know, so far, they're making all of the right moves. And of course, they're not going to telegraph or announce all their moves ahead of time because they don't want the enemy to get ahead of them. You know, all war is deception, right?
Right.
But the moves that they've been making so far are the correct ones. And it seems like they came very prepared, very well researched, very well thought out to accomplish that. And in the business world, that has also been their success story. I mean, everybody thought that he was going to, you know, make a complete mess of Twitter, and he was able to turn that around. Nobody thought he'd be able to make rockets cheaper, and he was able to do that at a, you know, incredibly fast pace. So if anyone
well, it
could
seems
do
there's
it,
more of a purpose there than there was. Sorry, Sean, what did you say?
But just that if anybody could do it, like I can't think of anybody better suited for that job or more likely to actually pull off an impossible task.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It seems there is definitely like more of a purpose to the new Trump administration than in 2016. But 2016 was sort of like, I think people had the sentiment of like, oh my God, he won. And I think even Trump was like caught off guard by that reality. Yep. So Prude, your computer died on you?
Yeah, it just like froze up on me, and I have no idea why. And then it took a second to restart, and I was like, no. This OS is on an M.2. Don't you dare like start getting into some weird boot cycle with me. I don't have a tech priest with me, so we're getting. See, I mentioned 40K, and this is what happens. So, anyways, everything worked. All hail the Omnissiah. We're back. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Gosh, what an absolute disaster that was. But hey, it's not a live show without some technical difficulties, isn't that right? But I mean, I feel like for right now, the two avenues to resist all this, Sean, is going to be from outside international pressure And then secondly, right now, at least domestically with the libs, it
Yeah.
really just feels like all the energy's in the court system and there's nowhere else to go. Because that's where I see everyone banking on. It's just the courts right now, and how often they want to play the game. Like and it's funny too, because like even the administration is kind of playing ball with this legitimacy. And in my mind, it's like legitimacy died like 35 million illegal immigrants ago. But like even Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth doing the like renaming, bringing back Fort Bragg, but you're renaming it after a World War II Bragg, not the original general. Braxton Bragg, which is frustrating. And also, but the reason why is because naming things, military posts after Confederate generals is illegal under the National Defense Authorization Act of 2021, and there's a whole naming commission. So he's kind of got his hands tied behind his back, even if it's a crock of shit, in my personal opinion. So I don't know.
A street after Robert E. Lee.
Well, not on a military base. You can't name a military installation after General Lee. No.
Oh man,
it's criminal.
So to Gio, to your point with this as well, as far as making these things more permanent, I think the executive orders, in order to not run afoul of the law, are capped at like 18 months or something like that. Like basically after that time, like, hey, this should really be something that goes through Congress as opposed to just an executive action. So yeah, that's where in these 2 years, I think what they're trying to do is, if they can get this patronage network, their own version, spooled up, and at the same time cut off the heads of the Hydra that was feeding the old regime, where, some of them are going to want to join willingly, others will join out of desperation and necessity, but politics is about rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies. And I think right now they're making the rapid structural reforms that they're the ones who dispense patronage, not the outgoing regime. Either you work with us or you get exiled. Which do you prefer? And there's going to be a lot of grumbling and stomping of feet and showboating as far as, oh, this is an outrage, I can't believe it. But, if they stick to their guns, eventually people will fall in line. And we've already seen it. That's the whole preference cascade from the business world as well.
Sean, Gio tells me that you're quite a movie buff.
Yeah, a bit.
Seen anything good lately?
Oh, geez, have I? Oh man.
You seen anything bad lately?
There was this tweet about Hollywood.
That might be easier to ask.
Yeah, it's probably easier.
Geez, boy, the past year, I think I've been struggling to think of a movie I've remotely found interesting. I'm really kind of drawing a blank on anything that's recent where I wasn't I know you've been talking about the Nosferatu film. Yeah,
I'm very soured on it.
Yeah.
Wasn't it just like a sex fantasy? Wasn't it a Gooner film?
You could make it a Gooner film if you really wanted to push it. I mean, it's Eggers' weakest movie, and more anti-Christian than the Northmen, and that's saying something.
Oh my god. No, but I saw this tweet today. Oh, go ahead, Prude. What are you going to say?
No, I was going to say that's the last. It's like the last. That's the first time I've gone to see something in theaters. I am watching, or what I have downloaded to watch because I was waiting for it to come out, is a movie called The Duel with Callan McAuliffe and Dylan Sprouse and Patrick Warburton, because the premise of it sounds so stupid, but Cap and I really want to watch it, and I have it downloaded ready to watch. I'm so excited to go through it. Basically, it's about a guy who gets notices his girlfriend, he gets cheated on by his friend, and so they go to Mexico to engage in actual pistol dueling, and Patrick Warburton's the judge. So I'm looking forward to this B-movie Kino, to say the least.
I heard there's this tweet that said that Hollywood's going through a transformation. They're going to have good movies again, and they're going to tell meaningful stories. And it's I don't know. I'm skeptical of that. I wonder if that you could tie that into our previous discussion. I wonder if Trump's economic policies will in some ways affect like the Hollywood culture industry machine in terms of, well, I mean, USAID has already done that. I mean, there was a bunch of studios and film and like TV shows that were getting money and news organizations. And a lot of those people, like especially the ones that are adjacent to Antifa networks, like fucking the Bellingcat, like they're fucked. Like it's over. They're still trying to dox people. Like I know recently the Travis Brown network tried to dox the Wonderkins that were working with Musk and Doge. But it's like, if you dox them, like, and there's no consequences for them, they're not going to get fired by Elon Musk. It's like, what's the point? You know, I mean, unless you want to like legitimately send crazed Antifa people to go and redact them. Apart from that, it's like, I think Hollywood is also suffering a sort of like legitimacy crisis, because at the same time that in some weird way, film is still like music culture is dying, at least in my opinion. It's like film seems to be like the normie bait, like mass culture appeal to like most normal people. It's not music anymore like it was with us soillennials. Or I could be wrong about that. But like it seems that film is still like the last holdout of like mass culture, that like, you know, everyone had to go see Barbenheimer. But at the same time, like Hollywood can only exist.
Gio, we reviewed Barbenheimer.
Yeah, I know. But like at the same time, Hollywood can only exist with like these mass discourse machines rather than films. So in like a weird way, like it's not that films become like an amusement park the way that, well, they have become amusement parks the way that Scorsese says, but they become like discourse amusement parks where like people that are very dumb can think they're very smart by talking about them. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
So prestige television, I think, is still a thing. I've had a moment to think about it. I did get through season 2 of Silo, and whether intentionally or unintentionally, I think that Silo, as they develop it, they're kind of at least aware of reading the room and kind of where these things are, where, an incoming Trump regime is leading, and, whether they, I think they're at least asking the right questions and kind of.
Is the second season good? I watched the first one and then I read the books. So is it good?
I thought it was worth watching. Yeah, I didn't think it was a waste of time. And then the screenwriter for Sicario is who also did Landman. I mean, obviously also did Yellowstone, which was like a big thing, and that got real gay real fast at the end there. But criticisms of the wife and daughter aside, as like one of the, as the B plot people, the show itself has been enjoyable as well. So within the budget of television world, I could see them being faster on the uptake of adapting to the new reality and falling in line with the preference cascade. Whereas, the film world didn't some like trans musical just win a film award or something? Like, I think they're totally up their own ass.
Amelia Perez or whatever it was called.
Perez.
Yeah, it's like something I'd never heard of until an award. They're like, "Oh, this is the best thing ever. We're giving an award," and I'm like, "Okay, you're living in your own." I mean, they're always living in a fantasy land.
2024 Spanish language French musical crime drama. Good God!
Nobody's heard of this thing, by the way. I don't think people have even seen this.
I don't think anyone has. Right? Yeah, that's my. I think.
I don't.
Totally gone. Yeah.
I'm under the impression that this was it's a Netflix original. Is that what I understand? And that basically it's a drug cartel boss from Mexico is like, I want to be a woman and I'll retire from the drug business if you make me a tranny.
There is that one clip going around that was like incredibly cringe, where they're saying like penis over and over again, but it's like musical style. It was like terrible. It was like you lost brain cells watching it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing. I don't think the culture industry, for whatever is left of its profitability, and there's still plenty of profitability left in garbage, just because there are millions of people who are programmed to defend slop and to get excited for next slop. Again, that word, I don't even like that word and how it's been popularized on the side of things. But I just think that they're going to be, it's another bulwark of like quote unquote cultural resistance, right? Like, well, look at all of our like fat, overweight, dyed-haired developers on Civilization 7 or
Oh yeah, I saw that
forcing.
video.
It's been
That
all
one
over my
chick was a
timeline.
wood, though. I gotta admit, the blonde chick in the front, she was a wood.
She had a decent pair of something on her. But other than that, like, for the Kingdom Come Deliverance sequel, this like really shitty attempt, I guess, to continue the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which had its perfect like death in 2018 with Endgame. I feel like right now it's probably like what Sean said, TV. Like I feel like that's probably the one last good avenue. I've watched more TV shows in the last probably 5-6 years than I have movies. So I think that's where things are still going to go for culture content is going to be TV.
Yeah, and I think TV is able to be more agile. They're able to read the room and turn that around faster than film. And film probably has a lot more entrenched political considerations. So, and to your point, there's probably going to be a lot of turnover that without USAID money. I know Texas had with like Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey, they're pushing for that. Texas is going to be a subsidized filming site for films that basically to get Hollywood out of Hollywood.
And, like Vancouver, yeah,
right, and maybe out of Vancouver too, yeah, but to attract that, we're like Georgia,
also out of Georgia,
yeah, Georgia, yeah.
So that rebalancing is occurring right now. So maybe once that's done and pieces have rearranged, hopefully the output is different, and we'll get something out of that.
There's also like,
go ahead, Gio. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like there's personalized content. I think like that's gonna be the trend of the future. Like it's funny because like I was watching I don't know like why they're so addicting, but like that game that these YouTubers they like film, it's called Battle Simulator.
Oh, totally accurate Battle Simulator, yeah.
Yeah, like you have like US Army or like Space Marines gunning down like like waves of millions upon millions of zombies or orcs or aliens or whatever. But I'm thinking like the potential for AI to create media for people to where they can have their like ridiculous Gooner fantasy or like some kind of Marvel slop, but it's like because I believe the game also has like Thanos versus a million zombies or whatever. It's like I think like the potential for like postmodern schlock to where it's kind of like John Wick is like the ultimate postmodern gun fu film where it's like there's no purpose to anything. It's just what people want. Like, don't bore us, get to the chorus. I think like that's going to be a trend of the future. Like you're going to have like Art F. Slurs doing very interesting things, but nobody watches that. Or you're going to have like mass slop where it's just like, let's just have a whole movie of gun scenes. Let's who cares? Like a whole movie of just like gun fu. Who cares about anything else? I think like that's going to be like the sort of like reification of culture. That's going to be like a big thing, I could be wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong, but yeah.
Yeah. So I'm skeptical of AI in general. I agree with Charles Haywood that like this weird myth that AGI is just 5 years away and we just need infinite Jeets to close the gap until AGI replaces them as a ridiculous. It's this absurd fantasy. The other part of that too is, what the left has been calling late stage capitalism, or you've probably heard my rants several times before on a lot of millennials and then some Zoomers as well, kind of view the world as all marketing and sales and no R&D, or like it's this idea of innovation of the product is over and we're all just fighting a zero-sum game for market share or the attention economy. I think with this sovereign wealth fund and reorientation to competency, profitability, actually improving things, we're going to have people who have real experiences and something to say that kind of storytelling can come back, as opposed to, so actually there's a lot in Hollywood where people complain, again, the marketing people are running the asylum of, you've got to have to have a tie-in. So we have to have a movie about Nike or BlackBerry or, like a board game or whatever.
Yeah, America is
like
product. Like there's so many movies about product. Like there's the difference being is like I like the movie The Founder. I think it's good about Ray Kroc. It's a great movie, and it's so funny because like when I watched it my dad watched it for the first time a couple of years ago, and he's like, wow, that Ray Kroc's an asshole, but like I love his business acumen. And I was like, welcome to America, Dad. Yeah. But like you have what was the two more recent ones, the Flaming Hot Cheetos movie and then the fucking Air Jordans one. Like those are the
Air
great
Jordans movie.
They made an Air Jordans movie with fucking Matt Damon and what's his name? Like
they
I think
made one
directing
on Pop-Tarts, didn't they?
I think so. I think they've got. I don't know if it's out yet, but they've got one on Pop-Tarts being made. But yeah, like there's so many like we're scraping the bottom of the fucking barrel, like the industry is. That movies have like we're now doing biopic film, epic stories about products. And I think these are a great form of enculturation for what new America is, the great big shopping mall of this continental 48, but also that they're running out of stories because it's the same shit over and over again, whether it's and you can call it like the boys syndrome, where like you have to make commentary about current thing because you cannot resist the temptation to have my ethnically diverse, like strong female lead, skinny, endomorphic, nerdy man of ethnically ambiguous background.
Just say Zendaya,
shit on white guy.
Is taking too long.
Yeah, Zendaya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's so much more than just her being part of the problem.
Yeah,
I'm just saying. My hot film take is just bring back Harvey.
Well, I think this is the result of leading with marketing, right? They think of, okay, what is the sales pitch going to be and work backwards from that, as opposed to starting with a good story. And people who do good screenwriting have been complaining about this for like a decade. And the fact that I forget his name, but whoever wrote Sicario and Landman and Yellowstone, I mean, like he's this now like hit screenwriter because the field is so empty. It's like him and nobody else who still knows how to write things that sound like real people living real lives. So
Taylor Sheridan.
Yes. So the opportunity has never been better once people actually have some experience and real life to tell to bring back. I mean, maybe we'll go back to kind of like the gritty 70s films where, street guys actually had something to say.
That could be it. Yeah, that could, but I don't know. Like, it seems that like Hollywood or like the small screen. I mean, I remember during Trump's first term, it was like, are they still going to like go with the whole, like in every cop drama, in every like glowy type of movie where it's like these, a group of Trumpian fascists are taking over the White House or whatever, or like, the Proud Boys are in the local police force, or you know what I mean? Like, that media is obviously still being produced. Like there's still like Law and Order going on, but I noticed like it doesn't have as much. I mean, it could be wrong. It could like still have immense sway over like upper middle class housewives or whatever. But like, I don't know, like, are Zoomers like after like Euphoria, for instance, like is there like a Zoomer show that's like the It show that has like essentially gay race communism? Like, I don't know. It's like,
well, I think Gio, the media is way too like algorithmically tailored. Like there's no Game of Thrones, there's no HBO It show anymore. I mean, I get it. There's some big shows that people like that's kind of normie popular, whether it's like Severance or Murder in the Building or whatever. Like there's some shows that are it, but also like you can watch how quickly they degrade and then they move on to next thing. Like there's no Rome going on where everyone is watching it or talking about it. Like the age of the water cooler, TV show talk died when you had more than like 6 options. Now you've got a million. You got Tubi, Netflix, YouTube TV, YouTube Originals, and Amazon Prime, etc. There's all sorts of stuff that's going to prevent it from being like one. So they're all there, but they all have the same themes because it's all an incestuous little pot. I hope that we kind of get 70s movies like what Sean was saying, is that at least then you'd get something grittier and far more realistic. Because I think the thing with millennial writers, and you saw this when like the whole they were going after what's his name, the guy who translated all the scrolls, being a part of Doge. They were like they were comparing him, I think his name's Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, where they had said, oh, look at all these great things he's done, and he's not even 25. And then it's like this aging millennial writer for Mother Jones is like, he likes his cats, and he's sometimes good at this, and he's got like a BA in English. And it's just like, the people who are writing these movies have no life experience, and they all live in a huge fucking bubble, and there's nothing good that can come from them, period. Like when I get a writer that's just like, yeah, I had to like gun somebody down because I live in a low trust neighborhood, and here's my story about it. I'll be back when we get Death Wish,
Yeah,
we had Death Wish though, but what are you gonna say, Sean?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where it's heading. As much as it is kind of indulgent, I enjoy Landman for the same reason I enjoy Billions. It's not necessarily realistic, but it's drawn from real life. Like, they're relatable experiences that feel like, oh, somebody who wrote this has actually gone out and done things and knows how things work. I think, yeah, that's it's same with Ryan Stone talks about the problem with new Star Wars is the original Star Wars was drawn from Westerns and samurai movies and Buck Rogers and synthesized into some new thing. But new Star Wars is written by fanboys of the original Star Wars, which is why it feels so, like slop, right? So if we have an overall preference cascade that returns towards competency and productivity, that means people actually have to do new things and work in jobs where it's not just some dead end office, David Graeber bullshit type job like Severance, where that's like the most relatable show right now. Maybe people who actually go out and do things and make things will have stories to tell that then filters into the media that we consume.
What's the show about?
Landman. It's about
Severance.
It's like people who turn their brain off when they go to work, and basically like they kind of like if you ever read Haruki Murakami's Hardboiled Wonderland at the End of the World.
I get it. Wow, what was the one that Dasha was on? What was that show everyone was watching? I never watched it.
Succession,
yeah. Is that still going or no?
I don't think so. I think it ended.
Yeah, I think it ended.
Yeah, I watched like a few seasons. I think I watched like 3 seasons of Billions, but then it got too ridiculous. I'm like,
and every show suffers from that the keeping up good writing is hard. And I think for exactly that reason is you hire a bunch of writers and they've stored up a lifetime of experiences and they dump it all out in the course of a year or two of writing, and then they hit bottom and they're like, oh, shit, now I got to make up stuff and I've, run out of real things, and the show gets more and more desperate. But I think that's happened overall. And this excuse of, markets are just so fractured and we don't have a cohesive culture. I mean, there's some truth to that, but I think just the writing has gotten bad because people don't actually live interesting lives anymore. I mean, at the same time that the writing for all these shows and films have gotten so bad is the same time that we have an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, of, atomization and deracination. These are not unrelated phenomena. It's a cultural over-processed blandness in general that, of course, precipitates through, how we reify or look at ourselves in the mirror through media, as well as just like actually living our lives.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead, Gio.
No, I'm looking at the thing of Severance here, and it's like there is like sort of a glut of like sci-fi dystopias. Like there is sort of like, I noticed like a lot of these like streaming services like Amazon Prime or Tubi even will like fund productions of this genre. And it's like, I think because the zombie thing is dead. I mean, no pun intended, but like the zombie thing is like kind of past. So maybe like sci-fi dystopias are back. You never know. Like it's, yeah. What were we going to say, Prude?
I was gonna say that there's these millennial and even Zoomer like slice of life stories that are really popular, but they all play under the same guise of dystopia. Like this is just existing under the current time, which they feel like is incredibly apocalyptic, or at least like it's the slow decay kind of apocalypse, the Mad Max one, where like there are things that exist, but like it's all kind of slowly fading away institutionally, and like you just have to manage And I mean, like, I think that dystopia is popular, one, because it's easy to give you any sort of frame of reference for it. And so right now, like the popular frame is like corporate or like fascistic takeover, because these are all libs that can't write anything worth to save their lives. Like, this is why The Boys fell off so fucking fast after the first season. Whereas and other shows too. And I mean, like, I feel like in the age of Trump, you can't write good politics because truth is better than anything on TV. The Veep had the same problem, and so did House of Cards. After they got rid of Kevin Spacey and they had to deal with like this Trump-like thing, they're like, well, how do we make like our political thriller more interesting than like the Trump era? And it's like, well, you can't. That's the best part. I mean, it killed that genre more or less. I don't think you're going to see a return to it effectively. But every TV show, from like The Boys to others that make fun of politics, they all have their kind of like stand-in for AOC or Tulsi or whatever, because I can tell by the hair or however it goes. And so it's just like, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. So everything right now has got to be corporate sci-fi dystopia, or just sort of a hellscape, because everyone knows white collar jobs, or everyone has an idea of what a white collar job is. And that's a drum that's been beaten to death, I think, is like, oh, working in an office sucks. And I say this as a wagey, like, I get it. I relate to it, but it's not good. Because I haven't seen anything that was like, the last good movie I saw, or anything that felt like remotely good about like an office white collar thing, was like Steven Soderbergh's The Informant, and that's like a dark comedy true story movie, and that's from like 2007. And like that was the last like good thing I saw. And the stuff I've seen in clips of Severance doesn't look very appealing to me. So I just think that there's going to be a huge delay if there is going to be a quote unquote vibe shift in the entertainment industry. I just don't see it happening anytime soon.
There's a really cheap like Tubi films, for instance. Like, there's this one that's like an apocalyptic film. I think it's called Korra. Or there's another one called Extinction. Like, they a lot of them are like cheap pieces of shit, but like you could get like some quality entertainment out of it. Like, I think like these smaller studios are going to be the way of the future. Like, I think like huge like Hollywood, like all these films that these like film review channels on YouTube, these like soylennials that review films, like that sort of bait. I think like they make too much of it, and it's not going to last. Like, I think people do want something authentic, but there's going to be like most people that don't. Like, people are just happy with slop, because like, let's face it, like a lot of Zoomers, if they do want something authentic, they're just like watching anime, for instance. You know what I mean? Like, Western cartooning's dead pretty much. It's not completely dead, but like, yeah.
But is that the Rat Park experiment, that the reason they're turning to slop is because their lives are shit and they're depressed?
Yeah.
I mean, if things get better, their taste will change, right? So...
Right. I don't know, Sean. Like, I mean, there's an argument to be made that like when life gets better, people do gravitate towards like slop or like shit for brains content, because there's no like real weight or moral obligation. But then you do have the counter thesis, for example, of like, this is what Marcuse said, that like art becomes a form of escapism to escape like the brutalist reality of the sort of like brutal, crushing nature of modern capitalism. But at the same time, I think that the opposite's true in some weird way. Like, as things become more I mean, I don't know. That's actually, now that I think about it, that's not true, because like, when was their last like truly great time in cinema? It was like the it was like the 90s to the early 2000s. Where the Western world, like, not if you lived in like Africa or Eastern Europe. God forbid.
Are you saying this partially out of nostalgia, or are you just saying this because you genuinely think there's quality to it and there hasn't been a good film since 2010?
Both.
Okay.
No,
okay.
Okay. Nostalgia.
No, like, there have been some banger movies since 2010. They're just like diamonds in the rough. But also, I'll push back a bit, because I think that Sean's got a point. When did The Walking Dead first start, Gio?
2011 or 2012.
2010, and it was filmed the year prior. So we are having an apocalyptic movie in the midst of the aftermath of 8 years of Bush and the global financial crisis. Do you think people are interested in the apocalypse at that time?
Pretty much.
Okay. Do you think that if things were to get better, maybe we might have some more hopeful, borderline jingoistic stories?
Maybe, yeah.
I'm going to say yes, and the left is going to go hard in on it. And if the Super Bowl commercials were any indication, they're going to go for quote unquote meritocratic colorblind libtardism. And that's what they're going to push real hard. Although I'm going to pause for a second. I have this great story I wanted to share with you all because this is so. I broke the Greer Head pledge. I spent my Super Bowl Sunday evening at my parents' place, and my roommate came along with me, and we had steaks and burgers and other great stuff while the game was playing. We played darts during the halftime show for obvious reasons, because no one's going to sit through that bullshit. But they had, for those who watched the Super Bowl, sorry that you did, and I'm sorry as well. But they brought back, what was it, Billy Crystal and what's her name from There's Something About when Harry Met Sally. They were recreating the famous fake orgasm scene, but it was the Hellman's commercial. And, she's putting Hellman's mayonnaise on her sandwich, and she's doing the whole fake orgasm thing. And then Sydney Sweeney does the famous line of, I'll have what she's having. And my roommate is very innocent in terms of the fact that he's maybe seen less than 20 movies in his entire life. And so he myself and my parents are just like, oh my God, I can't believe they're about to do like the whole fake orgasm on TV for millions of people to watch When Harry Met Sally all over again, just with an older Billy Crystal and an older what's-her-name. And he goes, oh, well, that's just way too much mayo on a sandwich. And I was just like, oh, you sweet summer child, you innocent man, and God bless you for it. I just couldn't help. I laughed harder at his statement than anything else. And I just thought that's clearly too much mayo to put on a sandwich. And I'm just like, you have no idea what this is from, and better for you because of it.
The only commercial I watched was the one, because it was on Twitter, the one with like the girl boss football star, and she's like against a guy that kind of looks like a giga chatted Bob Probert. It's like, what was the point of that? Like, I don't know. It's like, the one I'm talking about, the football one, right? What was that selling?
I don't recall.
It was like a light-skinned black girl, and she's playing tag football with like.
Oh, it was like a Nike commercial.
It was a Nike commercial,
or Nike or NFL, one of the two. Like it was a commercial, but the old trope of girls can do the same thing boys can do.
Yeah.
And again, to go back to like, what was it, the last episode we had on this channel about Volpez's article on like gender ideology.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this the other day on my timeline because my wonderful Twitter mutuals exposed me to the hell and all sorts of other stuff, man-made horrors beyond your comprehension, where it was like, did you know, and this like Zoomer TikToker girl was like, did you know that men have to wear belts with their pants because of how their hips are? And I'm like, oh my God, it is so over. And it's just like, and even Dan Baltic was making fun of it. She's like, why do you want me to wear like low cut jeans? They're going to cover my belly button anyway. And I'm like, oh no, we're making jokes about biologically illiterate children. It's over.
Don't Zoomer girls wear like the old school, like hip huggers, like, 90s mom hip huggers? Don't they wear that now?
I think Mitt Romney wears that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, sorry, it was flag football, and the guy kind of looked like Bob Probert. I don't know, like like, did you want to talk about the Yay commercial? That was interesting. But let's not talk about it. Actually, that's probably.
I think
did you buy a T-shirt?
Has been an epic disaster for a particular community.
If anything, I think we should have more Galaxy gas out now than anything else. Just keep huffing, big guy.
Brand Galaxy gas, yeah. Restoring order with one sniff.
All the Zoomer girls wear I was saying this the other week, and I feel so vindicated. Like we are so like the 70s are so back. We have a conflict in the Middle East.
Bell bottoms in the 70s.
I mean, again, like the Zoomers are approaching 30 at this point, guys. How old? Hold on a second. How old are the oldest Zoomers? Late 20s. Okay. Oh, the Zoomer's 1997. What's the youngest Zoomers? Because if Gen Alpha, and again, I don't want to feel
Gen
that
Alpha's in high
old.
school now.
The youngest Gen Z are 12 years old, according to this. But anyways, I'll take it. That's fine. I'll live. I'll suffer. I'm ready to die. Sci-fi dystopia is dead because we are living in one. So true.
Yeah,
So true. Depends on where you draw the arbitrary line. What will be the arbitrary line for Zoomers in Gen Alpha? I feel like it's got to be COVID.
Yeah. Y2K fashion's been in for a minute. Thank God. I have to see. I have to go. Like, I should just bite the bullet and go on TikTok. Like, I just, like I should do it. I'm trying to like increase the Instagram reels, but
like bell bottoms are back.
Yeah,
Corduroy is back, and 70s mustaches are really back in style. Like I noticed this a couple of weeks ago. I was at a coffee festival, and I was walking around downtown, and I was like, wow, it really is. It felt like the 70s in terms of fashion.
Yeah.
A lot of Zoomer chicks are wearing midriff tops. Well, I hope they're skinny.
Some of them have like fat jugs, though. You can't.
They can. Some of them can lose weight.
Oh no, that's mean.
Oh, it's true. Even that fat Democratic activist, Olivia Giuliano, was just like, I've lost 50 pounds, and she blames it on Trump's economy. And I'm like, honey, you have a Substack article about taking Ozempic. I hope you go blind.
Trump really did her a favor then, like.
Funny how all the body positivity bullshit went right out the window as soon as Ozempic was available.
Yeah, well...
I remember when it was marketed as a diabetes drug. They had the whole like, what was that? And, and it's just like, now it's just like, I went blind because I tried to cheat God and like lose 50 pounds fast. And I'm like, well, now you won't see food anymore.
I said this such a monkey's paw curse, like straight out of Something Wicked This Way Comes, or like Friday the 13th, right? Okay, you're going to be beautiful, but too blind to see it.
Even Alex Jones is on Ozempic. That's terrible. Like, he looks terrible now.
Well, he's also got a pretty good gym routine as well.
Yeah,
but like Ozempic does things to your body that I think they call it like Ozempic face, and they're already marketing it with a lot of plastic and
no buccal fat.
Yeah, and all that stuff too. It's a disaster, folks.
Ozempic didn't do anything for me. Like, maybe I was just on a low dose, but I tried it for a month. I'm like, this doesn't do anything. Fuck it.
Our most loyal female listener, Kate J. Wow, body positivity was all cope. You're telling me this for the first time.
You know what works? I'll tell you what works. Okay, nicotine, lifting weights, and occasional cardio. Well, actually,
and just don't eat.
Well, I mean, that's hard though. So you got to like outpace it by actually lifting weights. So try to eat only 2 times a day if you can. More meat, less carbs. That's what works. Ozempic, I don't trust it like in terms of the side effects. Who knows what's going to happen? Like, is it going to give you cancer 20 years down the line? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, well, I mean, everything gives.
Oh, we have no longitudinal studies for Ozempic either. Like, we're in like 20 years from now. Like, you're gonna see these like micro 30-second ads or less beamed into your Neuralink, where it's like, if you and your loved one had been diagnosed with like mesothelioma during complications due to Ozempic usage in 2025, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Like, it'll happen to that. It'll be great.
Yeah. No, David G's right. And drink a shit ton of coffee as well. And if you can. Like, if you're like me, you can't like live with black coffee. Like, at least switch to creamer or something with less calories. Like, stay away from like, I don't know. There's people that are saying like even Coke Zero isn't like that bad for you. I saw this thing like on Twitter about it. Like, all these Ray Pete people were talking about it. But then it's like, I don't know. Ray Pete's got a weird. I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. I can't live with black. I can't live. No, nowhere. I told you. I tried Ozempic for a month. It didn't do anything. I mean, because I was like on a low dose, but I mean, I just don't trust it. So, yeah.
Anorexic e-girls love their diet. They also love their regular Coke that they take through the olfactory glands.
Nicotine gum is probably better than Ozempic. Put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many great ways to get nicotine nowadays. If you just go to outpouch.com/Prut and get 10% off your first order, it'll be a great time.
Oh, I knew you were going to slip that in.
I am. If anything, I've been told I'm a great huckster, but that is also insulting.
Throw up the screen. Throw up the screen, like what you can get from Elf Pouch.
I will towards the end. Chudzins, whoa, yeah. So does I don't know how my tiny ass YouTube account and my Twitter following managed to get cleared for an affiliate link, but boy, oh boy, did it.
Giant Gio hockey. Did you see that video? Someone did a hockey fight between me and Ethan Ralph using AI. That was crazy.
No, where is this? Put it in the private chat right now. Put it in the private chat right now. We're gonna go watch that, and then we'll go to the super chats.
Let me find it.
We need our Kino between my two favorite big people.
Oh, it was only like a 2-second video, but like it was pretty good though. It was pretty good.
I liked the one that Order Restorer put out where it was like a fighting game between Patrick Casey and Will Stansel. That was so good.
Let me see if I can find it. Giant Gio.
Also, isn't it funny that like the lasting legacy of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd is a George Droid shitcoin? Sean, surely you have something to comment on that with just like everything's a shitcoin now. Like I feel like I'm in the great like gold rush, but it's all fool's gold.
Yeah, well, so everybody should go to the website Epsilon Theory. He's got an article on financial nihilism, and this is also all the financial YouTubers and people I know have talked about this as well. It's why everybody looks for convexity of returns. Everybody gambles because we've had this Brezhnev stagnation of our managerial regime for 20 plus odd years, and especially millennials and Zoomers who grew up in the post 2008 crisis. Everything's been flatlined. If you look at Peruvian Bull has this great chart of the S&P 500 divided by government debt.
Well, what about debt though?
Yeah, you cut out there.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think I found it.
Okay, so put that in the private chat, and I'll load that up next.
I can't believe someone made Ethan Ralph Montreal Canadian. That's pretty funny.
That's perfect. Biting my lip while JD shows me how to apply eyeliner. All right, Sean's back.
Oh, did I drop out there? Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
That's one thing we didn't talk about is the national debt. People don't talk about that anymore.
Yeah, that is true. No one talks about the national debt.
So I'll touch on that. That goes into the sovereign wealth fund piece as well, actually. So there is a concept called fiscal dominance. Basically, there is a problem that open market operations and the ability of the government to place treasuries, and government is funded with treasuries. Taxes are just a way to punish political enemies. It's like a holdover from before Liberty bonds that funded World War I. All real government funding comes from convincing people to buy treasuries or institutions, really. But the capacity, it's because China is selling off, Russia is selling off, like as the Washington consensus closed, all these other countries that needed those treasuries for their currency or exchange reserves of their banks, no longer wants to keep them on their books. So it is reaching this kind of crisis point. That's another reason why they're pivoting to a sovereign wealth fund from the previous consensus. Is they have to create basically an internal market that's going to have the liquidity in order to continue sustaining the system, basically. And again, that's kind of part of that conversation before too about being able to buy out the existing Wall Street regime as we pivot from capital appreciation back to actual productivity and profitability. So part of the leverage buyout is, if you think government debt is first of all, government debt rocketed in the past 4 to 8 years anyway. Something like 50% of the money in circulation or money supply was made in just like the past 4 years or something like that. I'd have to pull up the stats, but it's pretty close to that. The danger of this LBO move is we're going to continue that trend. It will be an exponential curve up of even more leverage in order to facilitate all these changes. And the risk that the incoming regime is taking is they've really got to ramp up the productivity and cut the waste in order for that debt to actually be sustainable and start to bring it back down. And again, that's kind of what Elon was hinting at in that Twitter space, is the only way you can both reduce inflation and create more credit in the long run is by actually being more productive. We can't just continue on this trend of printing money to paper it over and make asset prices go up on a spreadsheet, but everything in real life is stagnant. You actually have to be more productive in order to reduce inflation and have more resources available to issue as credit. So which is how every leverage buyout works. It's you take on a lot of debt up. That's the leverage in the leverage buyout. You're taking on a lot of debt up front to buy out the old owners, but then you've really got to have a way to run that institution much more efficiently in order to make that debt sustainable and pay it down.
M. Louise asks, Prude?
Yeah, are you expecting a financial crisis, or do you think this is the way to steer the ship?
Yeah, so I think this is the correction. That's the other part too, is so because of that managerial regime that is focused just on, asset prices going up, and that has contributed to this gerontocracy of, boomers don't want incomes to improve for their kids, because if, the money that you make working for a company increases, that hurts share price, right? That hurts shareholder value. And all they care about is that the price of the stocks that they own in their IRAs and 401ks continues to grow up because of ERISA passed in 1974. That's how they're paying for their retirement. But the problem with that is they've created this impossible scenario that every asset that a boomer owns or that's important to an owner, they've made basically completely illiquid, and trading in that is getting thinner and thinner and much more volatile. Because it's so much more rigid. It's sort of like if you don't have little earthquakes, eventually you have one big earthquake. The question has been, who is going to buy out the boomers, because they've intentionally capital starved everybody after them and made those markets so illiquid that nobody can afford to buy them out. Until the past couple weeks, I figured it was just going to hit a crisis point, and then they were going to make the Fed do it with the special purpose vehicle, which is what they did with Maiden Lane with mortgage-backed securities. They rationalize that post hoc of, well, the Fed's not supposed to own things other than treasuries, but because mortgages are technically guaranteed by the government already, we're going to consider those government assets. And if we wrap it up in a special purpose vehicle created by the government, technically the Fed doesn't own the assets. They own a government created entity that then owns the assets. So that makes it okay. I think to come back to how the PayPal Mafia are going to benefit financially from this is they know that getting on the inside track, and I think this is also going to be a big opportunity for the younger generations who have really not had any assets they could get buy-in on the ground floor other than crypto or social media presence as like a marketing tool. They're going to facilitate the new assets that then the old ones are going to roll over into and have an opportunity to buy low and ride that wave up, which they've been denied until recently. So by issuing that kind of private facility credit, echoes of Michael Milken creating the junk bond market as an alternative to the banking system, when in the 70s stagflation, the banks liked their institutional economics, and Klaus Schwab was, writing his famous book then in the 70s about, that their, steady state managerialism, same as basically mirroring the Brezhnev stagnation in the Soviet Union. Then all along comes Michael Milken and says, oh, we could just create junk bonds, and then that's going to facilitate all these other companies to be able to do leverage buyouts and start new businesses and actually fund real economic growth. And then when Ivan Boesky got nailed for insider trading, he threw Michael Milken under the bus in order to get a reduced sentence. And kind of like with traditional finance markets now, where they're like trying to assimilate Bitcoin and crypto, if they're trying to get an envelope around it to contain it. That's what they did with junk bonds back then too. That the guy who basically created that market, they threw in jail, and then the traditional finance kind of took it over and absorbed it into the existing regime system. But yeah, without giving too much away for my other forthcoming appearance, there is a mechanism in place to facilitate that. And it squares the circle of solving a lot of problems. It doesn't rely on the Fed to do it. Basically, they're going to create their own structure to do it with a lot more flexibility. That's what I think the Sovereign Wealth Fund is going to be. And it's going to be a mechanism that both allows the boomers to be bought out, same way it allows all these feds and useless people in the government to get bought out. And it's going to provide the facility to have the money to pay patronage to the younger generation and those on the right who've supported them to get into power, that they're going to be able to make good on their promises of get us installed and we'll make it worth your while.
Someone mentioned Hawk 2. She like came back and like I didn't listen to it, but like that was crazy though.
Well, someone
Like-
has to spit on that rug pull. So,
Yeah.
well, with that, Sean, when's your upcoming appearance on Mr. Burden Show?
So I believe we're recording it this Thursday. I'm not sure if it's going to be live or if we're recording it and he's going to play it later. So look for it soon.
All right. Well, we'll make sure to keep an eye out for that episode. I'm going to transition us over to the super chats. That way we can round this out quickly and
Can
quietly.
we hit the goal?
Oh, speaking of Ethan Rowell, why don't we just go ahead and go? I'll share a screen and put this on there. Here's your AI generated slop for everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Share the audio tab. Make sure my messages aren't showing before I go. Y'all don't need to know what esoteric group chats and networks I'm in.
Ethan Ralph, the helmet is off. The crowd is going, whoa, here comes Giant Gio from Toronto. He's ready to fight.
That's great. Oh, the announcer and everything. That's great.
I'm
You
a
know,
fan.
They could have imagine if they had an AI that could mimic Bob Cole and Harry Neal, because like those were the announcers for Hockey Night in Canada when I was a kid, and so like that would be great if it was like Bob Cole and Harry Neal. That'd be incredible. But that was pretty good.
I think you'll just give Sloppy Joe Stalin more ideas to
Yeah.
flesh this all out. All right. Well, we will start with the Prince of Ralph of Wales. I might throw that onto Gio's list of titles I have for him. So that'll just
Prince
go
of
on.
Ralph of Wales. Yeah,
That's
great.
really good.
Oh man, the Alpha male.
I'll start with the ones on Entropy first, and then we'll go to the YouTube super chats. As always, the Entropy link is the pinned comment in the chat, as well as down below in the description. We prefer that for both Gio and I, just because it takes less of a cut than Raja Mohan over here at YouTube. James Burnham says, Mike of Pole and the True Clear Reactor Network sends their regards. Well, thank you, James. I greatly appreciate it. I can't believe that that's a part of what was it? It's from frickin' some Marvel movie where that's actually a thing now. But he sends quite a few super chats actually. So he sends another one saying, speaking of bad movies, I heard that show Drive Time Movie Night makes them far more tolerable. I'm beginning to think that James is just Mike of Pole for this chat. Sean Schaefer says, nice to have my blood satellite rival on. It's always good to see another Sean on stream. I broke the pledge too, but my family and I are Eagles fans, so I have an excuse. I think anime is, for better or worse, going to influence the right-wing art going forward. And see Owen Zaleski's fan art of various podcasts. Probably true. It's not going away anytime soon. Just look at like the anime Jugend on twitter.com. They're not going away. Sam153 says, bring back 1980s/90s drug PSA commercials.
Oh, those are great.
Those were
Canadian
some
ones are great. Yeah.
There's some pretty good ones. Bring back the egg one. Since we're talking about the price
You know
of
what's
eggs.
crazy? Someone like some like Soylenial, like video essayist, some like bread tuber compared like Canadian PSAs when we were growing up to American ones. And the American ones are all like, this is your brain on drugs. This one's gonna, and the Canadian ones are like very like, Reddit style, like be yourself, do whatever you can be. Like that one where like the kids with their different talents, I remember, like it's like such a stark contrast. Where it's like the American ones are very stark and serious. But then there was other ones later on, like they had that were pretty like gratuitous. Like, do you remember the cooking one where the woman's like describing about like she's gonna get married and shit, and then she like there's like a pot of boiling oil just fucking falls on her face. Do you remember that one?
I don't recall.
Oh man, that was
the one
there was
I
some pretty
remember
brutal
is
ones.
the girl's on the diving board and she dives off and then the pool is empty of water.
Yeah, that one. Oh man. That was terrible.
Mm. All right, well, on to the next
The
one.
bullying
here.
one's the best, objectively the best. So the bullying one, you know the one, right?
Oh, the one that everyone uses because it's all the slurs. Yeah, that's a good one.
You're a little queer, aren't you? Like, that was the best was the fat kid, though, the fat bully. I've done that tone of voice so many times. Anyways, yeah, you could images you can hear. Anyways.
Yeah, and then Charlie Mackey says, "Good evening. I hope that you are all well." Well, thank you very much, Charlie. I greatly appreciate it. James Burnham says, "Me, Mike? No." And it's probably Capitalissimo if that's the case. Either which way, we will find you and we will make your life hard and painful. Willie McDuff is the most generous donor of the night for $49.99. I'm waiting for Gio to kick in there, but nevertheless,
$49.99. Let's get some subs. I guess it's subs on Kick. That's the way they do it.
Is that how they do it? I'm not on.
Yeah,
Kick.
so like PPP, he like yells like, "Let's get and Willie McDuff for 10 subs." We gotta go on Kick. That'd be great.
I suppose so. Well, there you go. But he says, chat legend Sean Wieland. Well, Sean has been a great friend, and Sean gave me a little gift earlier for Christmas of Telegram Premium. I see why people pay for it. That's really nice, actually, for active Telegram users. I appreciate it.
What does Telegram Premium do?
I can react more than one time, and I get access to all sorts of other great things. Son of Haster just sends a lovely salute for $5. I hope to see you at the conference, Son of Haster. I hope to see you there later with the Old Glory Club conference. Robert Reisenfeld says, China flew a spy balloon straight through Canada into the U.S. Canada should thank Trump for forcing their hand to become more sovereign. Well, I'll let the Canadian answer that one.
Maybe. But then again, I don't know. I mean, I get it, but like... I don't know. My brain's kind of fried after a few hours. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, if Trump is bluffing, it is sort of like an inspirational thing, then it would work out. But then if he is serious about the tariffs, then, I mean, I don't know. Canada does have a lot of problems. So it's hard to say.
So true.
Did that spy balloon, did it come from Canada?
I guess so. I'd have to look into it, but that's like 2 years old at this point.
Yeah,
I need to
the Chinese
go look it
spy
up.
balloon.
Hugo Gloss says Canada is more of a resource-based economy than Mexico. Plus, we basically have an equivalent workforce to Taiwan. We will be building chips. Yeah, there is more of a manufacturing base in Mexico than Canada.
Resource-based economy. Yeah. No, but I know what he means, though.
Yeah. Mellon says, supposedly Trump said that JD will not be his successor. So says the rug merchant. Has anyone seen this clip? I haven't yet. If it does exist, why would he not lie about that a la Project 2025? So he did say that, Mellon, on his Fox News interview with Brett Baer. He said that JD is a very capable guy and that it's too early to say who his successor is and that there are a lot of other guys who are hard at work or are very capable. So I think he's playing it close to his chest. I think Trump right now is 3 weeks into his administration and will probably play kingmaker once he's out and for the next election. But he did say it. But I'm all fine with I have my skepticism with Vance, but so far.
What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, what do you think? Who do you want to be?
Who's on the field at this point? Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Who the Democrats going to come up with too? That's another one.
Whitmer, Andy Beshear, Newsom.
Oh God.
I'm pretty sure Shapiro will run. Although I don't think America, despite everything that's happened to this country, I don't think America's ready for a Jewish president. It just doesn't jive well with the Democratic base, despite the fact that Jews overwhelmingly vote Democrat.
No, but Sean, what were you going to say? You think that Vance will be the heir apparent? Or
I mean, it seemed like he's being groomed at the moment to fit a Trump-sized hole. Now, whether he toes the line and goes along with that and proves that to be the case. I mean, him jumping in and defending big balls is a good example of, maybe he's rising to the occasion and can actually do that. But Trump wanting to, keep that close to his chest and not just make it a fait accompli that JD Vance has to earn that right, that's totally justified as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so far JD Vance has been really amazing, and I guess his connections to like Deneen and Vermeulen are a little worrisome for me, but I'm very happy with what he's done so far. I think that he understands to a large extent what time it is. Ethnarch for $9.99 says, should Afrikaners immigrate from South Africa? Is that country cooked? I think so. Most South Africans and Afrikaners specifically that I know will tell you that they're not going to leave.
Yeah.
And they'll stick it out to the bitter end. I think that Trump giving them refugee status and offering them to come here if they want to is a good rhetorical and polemical tool to say that those people have a right to be there and they're being persecuted. And even if it's done for other reasons, say like BRICS or China or whatever, bringing actual attention to the land expropriation bill and Julius Malema and the evils of that government is very good. But almost every Afrikaner I've ever talked to, from Ernst van Zyl to others, will tell you that they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, Julius Malema just the other day said that like he wants to kill white people. Like that's he can't stop. Like he can't help himself. I think it was who was it on Twitter? This Moradici on Twitter. He said that Julius Malema is probably like the greatest thing for the Afrikaners because like it highlights the actual issue to like outsiders that aren't shitlibs. And like it's like a very like glaring point of like this is what they face, like a genocidal maniac that could like literally come to power and just destroy everything.
Like Idi Amin.
Yeah, like an Idi Amin figure. Yeah, exactly. Like it's I don't know, man. But that song is kind of funny though. Like when he was dancing, like he was hopping up and down. Like when they do the pa, like it's like I don't know why that's like it's funny because like Emily Yukis, she tweeted this year's halftime was wild and it was that clip of the kill the boar.
Yeah. That was a banger tweet.
That was great, yeah. Like it's stuck in my fucking head now. It's stuck in my head. The Kill the Boar song. It's terrible.
Oh, I played myself earlier today by replying to one of these super chatters, and now there's like 4 of them in a row that are just total fucking brain rot.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
But to start it off, no, I am sitting in my comfortable computer desk chair. I am not throwing it back while I read these super chats. But I appreciate you giving me your money nonetheless. The things we do for money, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Shoot
yeah.
to kill.
I'm going to go through all of the ones that are not his first, and then I will just run through all of these and try not to blow my brains out. Luthemplar sends $5, says, not many thoughts right now, but here are some shekis. Well, thank you, sir. The shekis are appreciated. And then Joshua Beebe says, nationalize the Federal Reserve and fund government with the mortgage market. John, I'm going to let you take that one.
Nationalized Fed. So I don't think that's going to be necessary. Basically, yeah. So getting housing prices down is certainly one of the key issues on the table. Mass remigration is going to help with that a lot, I believe. But also investing in the capital to actually increase the housing stock, like the supply of housing. And that's something. So going back to my point of why a sovereign wealth fund is much more agile to make those kind of economic interventions as opposed to just like mucking about with interest rate policy. That's a great example of like if you need a targeted solution for a specific outcome, you need an institution capable of doing that as opposed to kind of these vague, slow, lumbering tools, which have been basically played out since 2008 as well. I mean, I think I've heard like, is this the end of the usefulness of monetary policy for like a decade now?
So you're not like a Ron Paulite. You're not like a Ron Paul had like where we should like nationalize the Federal Reserve and we should have like a different monetary policy. Go back to like you're not a gold bug or anything like that. I mean, a lot of that stuff is sort of like
we all came
cliche.
from that libertarian background, right? Or the path to reaction goes through the Mises Institute.
Yeah.
But So I honestly have to defer to guys like Tom Luongo and some of these others who understand the depths of international banking more than I do. So like with the sovereign wealth fund, my expertise is in capital formation and risk management and basically how money gets organized in order to facilitate doing useful things like getting oil out of the ground or mining or manufacturing things or whatever. And when you combine all those things together into a portfolio, how do you balance the risk between, different sectors and different things that you own so that you can withstand the ups and downs of volatility of the market, right? But when it comes to the inner workings of, Fed accounting, which is unlike anything else in the real world, or, the autistic details of the euro dollar market, I'm willing to admit, like, that's where my knowledge starts to fade out. And I'm going to rely on other people who I trust who know that system a lot better. To that end, I know the argument is kind of that Mises argument of like end the Fed is probably then the city of London is going to take us over or whatever is like the argument. Like I get where they're coming from with that, and they're probably not entirely wrong. And same with what's his name? I just had his name and I forgot it. Brendan Herrera. No, Brendan Herrera, one of the gun tubers.
Oh yeah, Brendan Herrera. Yeah,
he did a video on like, hear me out, don't lynch me, but maybe we don't need to completely eliminate the ATF right away, because there's been so much successful case precedent inside the ATF with their rulings that if we're going to do things like suppressor cans no longer being NFA items, or or no longer having SBRs as NFA items or whatever, basically gutting the ATF and restructuring it and getting and then getting the legislation passed to solidify a lot of that. Like basically don't give up a weapon while it's still useful to our guys, which again is always the problem with kind of that Austro-libertarian perspective, is like, oh, the solution is just we need to get rid of all these government things. It's like, but nature abhors a vacuum, right? And if you just get rid of them and the bad guys still have their slush funds and networks and ways to seize power, to your point earlier of the skepticism of, well, what happens if the other guys get in and they just reconstitute all that, right? Like that's a valid point, that we have to replace it with our own patronage network that also, by the way, is productive and profitable and makes things and innovates and does things like cheap rockets and Starlink. And I mean, because inherently, like, it's also innovation. I can't like explain what every innovation needs to be made in the next 20 years, but they're actual creative things that make our lives better, easier, more enjoyable, gives us maybe more leisure time, or we can afford to have families again. Like people are craving that, they're the main street quality of life improving and not just being depressed bugmen. And if people can be given that, or earn a place in helping to create that creates the national zeitgeist. And I know I've mentioned Friedrich List a few times already, but that was his big argument with a national political economy as well, is if you want to unify a country, to have a cultural zeitgeist or inertia behind a cause of making America great again, like that's how you do it. That's how you accomplish, how you transmute that emotional energy or spiritual energy into results that people actually feel.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's what I mean. Like the argument to just gut everything is like, when, like, for example, like I think like if you were to have like Based World ETF, there is a thing in was it Cincinnati? You had like those blood tribe people, and then you had like all these like Antifa, like these like black women and these like Antifa people with guns, like in open public.
Oh, all the checkpoint shit.
Yeah, the checkpoint shit. Like you could like literally get the ATF to like destroy like John Brown gun clubs. That'd be great. Like that.
I mean, that would be the smart thing to do. Would just be going to Honestly, I wish that we could rule like Democrats, where I would just be sending every ATF agent, every FBI agent to go through every John Brown gun club, every transgender clinic, every Black Panther, like Black identitarian movement, and either arrest them and confiscate arms, weapons, supplies, information networks, and then they can be given a choice of prison, execution, exile, like the take
snitches. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Or if you want to live comfortably, maybe you can snitch, and then we can go from there. But we don't rule like that, unfortunately. And one day I changes. I have like several super chats from one person, not Kaguya, who I'm going to read one of them because I promised I would. Outside of that, I'm just going to show them on screen because I'm not reading the rest because I'm not going to kill my brain. But
I'll read them.
Yeah, then Gio will read them, and then you can have clips of Gio reading them. Oh yeah, they're bad.
I'm doing this for free.
Yeah, we're doing it's bad. But
I thought Salmon Fish was going to be the one to post brain rot, but
no. I think
Salmon
Fish has ascended. He doesn't have the king title anymore. He had said that things are serious now, so he's on his own. He's on his own playing field. No one.
All right, throw them up.
I'm gonna read one of them, but I will.
Right.
You can have the rest. This is the one I liked though, just because I think it's great. He says, nationalize the Skibbity Lee land and change the name to Red, White, and the left has gone insane, Bald Eagle land, and add Sigma mortgages. I'm all for it. Bring it on.
Amazing, 100%.
Absolutely. Why not? I'll start from the top there, so Gio can read the rest.
This is not Skibbity whatsoever. This is not even Sigma. Don't hawk on my Tua. Don't even talk to me. We are Skibbity over. That was great. I like that. That's good.
Gio, you could be a great voice actor one day. You really could.
Yeah. Okay. The Skibbity Dack Sig Mafia featuring Glorge Droid, Milo G. Strapopoulos, Elongated Husk, and Emplemon God Kringus Donald Trump from Toho Project. Toho looks pretty interesting. I should get into Toho. It's like the gun anime game, right? No, I'm thinking of is it Toho or?
I'm now literally looking it up because I don't know.
They got like all this.
I only just got Helldivers 2, so I'm not the gamer to know all this.
It's a Japanese bullet hell game, so
yeah, and they got like the soundtracks and everything that they make.
I'm
Toho characters.
I'm playing Arcanum from like 2001. I'm gonna stay to my CRPGs like the 30-year-old boomer I am. Okay, that's
I like
this
those
one.
little Toho characters. I like the way they shoot each other. That'd be like Trump, like if he played Toho.
Oh, he's the one who's like, Baron's got his map games.
I wonder what those map games are. Does Baron play like Hoi 5 or Hoi 4?
Hoi 4, yeah.
Hoi 4, yeah. Okay. Not Kagaya. Donald Trump hitting the gritty and cream land real, while elongated crust cranks 90s on Ninja in Fort Skibbite Sigma. Oh boy.
Sean, I'm so sorry.
Deshaun Waifuland Selfumos.
Oh, I'm putting that in his title from now on. Oh, God.
Deshaun Waifuland Selfumos. Baron plays Clash of Kings. Oh man, Deshaun Waifuland Selfumos that are extra Sigma. This is very important for the chatters who listen to it in Invincible by Solid Snake in Turkey. Was there a Metal Gear Solid staged in Turkey? Was that like
I'm pretty sure.
Oh man. Was Solid Snake in Turkey though? Like was he like gonna redact Erdogan?
You know what? I'm gonna commit my open one of my grave sins. I've not actually played the Metal Gear series, so chat can grill my ass over the coals if they make it to 2.5 hours long. Last one from Not Cayuga, and then I'll read the one from Charlie Mackey.
Skibbity Sigma Alpha Rank 6. I can't believe I'm saying this. Skibbity Sigma Alpha Rank 6942 hitting the gritty for Ukraine Chinese style Sigma social credit bidlet payments to Brandon Sigmara aside. Great talk, everyone. Oh man.
Have fun with that. Keep that in
Not-
your brain.
Not calling
Charlie Mackey says, any hope for Vidia in the future? Will the big dev/publisher model survive?
No,
No, not for long. It will teeter on for probably another 5 to 10 years. But
Gaben has
it'll
already
pop.
stabbed those people in the back, so it's probably not going to last forever.
It'll last. It'll last a lot longer than you think. However, I think that you will see eventually like a 90s, early 2000s sort of pop wherein the larger AAA publishers and developers literally cannot sustain themselves. And because of creative differences, a lot of good talent are going to leave and create their own projects. And those projects that those guys create will probably have better hope for the future. And if you want to know more, Charlie Mackey, about my opinion on this, you can go read my article in the Frontier magazine that you can find online to read. So enjoy. Have fun with that.
Gio, are you watching the Four Nations? No, I refuse to watch the Four Nations because Russia's not a part of it. How can you have a fucking international hockey tournament without the fucking second largest hockey nation in the world? Russia. Over bullshit. Cool, because they invaded Ukraine. So no, I am not watching the Four Nations. I think America's got a good chance to win because of the goalies. But I mean, Bennington's pretty good, but you know. I put it this way. I have a strong suspicion that America's more likely to win than the other three nations. So, Ukraine? Ukraine? Why did Nigel Farage come out in support of Zelensky? Is that why? Wait, UKIP is dead though. Yeah, UKIP's gone.
It's all reform now. Sean, you got a name for your book you're working on, so that way we can be prepared when it comes out?
The tentative title right now is something along the lines of Ice 9, like the Kurt Vonnegut Cat's Cradle idea. Yeah, so stick with that. It'll at least be the subtitle, if not the main title. So that's the thing to keep an eye out for.
Alrighty. Well, Gio, what do you got going on this week?
Well, I released on Monday the episode with Fortisax. I think it's one of the best episodes of Content Minded. It's all about Canada, but also it has a lot of application to like non-Leafs. And then today I did another episode of the War Report with the boys that came out today in the afternoon. We talk a lot about mostly like the situation, possible situation in the Middle East, especially in regards to Gaza and Iran. But of course, we always inevitably talk about the Ukraine war. And but it was really good though. We did a lot of like deep analysis and how the geopolitical situation of Iran is much different nowadays than it was in the 80s with Ayatollah Khomeini and the Soviets versus America. So yeah, things are, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of ground that we covered. And we also talked about domestic stuff with Trump and, you know, and of course we talked about Gaza. So it was a pretty good episode. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think I'll probably come out with a Gen review soon on something. So.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I'll have another episode of the Stalin's War series out later, probably on Friday, while I am off and about doing things. Outside of that, my goal is to simply lock myself into a room, which will be my bedroom. I got a new desk on next to I have my computer desk for all this, then I have my regular desk. I'm just going to start handwriting essays again because that's what got actual good content out. So I'll be planning to write more in the future. I told myself I'm not going to do anything really on Twitter until I get some fucking writing done. So that's my goal. is to get some essays published and just sent out and done. And that'll be my goal. I have one for the Old Glory Club that also comes out this Friday, so that'll be there.
Nice.
And then last one from Not Kayugan. I'm going to let you read that, Gio, because it's directed to you.
Gio, is Queso your long-lost American brother? Who's Queso?
You'll find out eventually.
Okay, let me Google this. Queso.
Oh, they're
Oh,
Owen's
it's not that guy. Oh, he kind of does look like me.
that
Yeah,
is true.
Yeah,
Just a tad.
he's like, if I was Irish, that would be me, Queso.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Owen Zaleski says $3. He says, Prude, hold on, I have something to share. Well, please hurry up because I would like to go to bed. I'm going to start being mean to the audience. I've learned that goes places.
Yeah, that's the. Well, certain people just rake in super chats when they're mean to their audience. So, you know. Wait, Michael Hostler, is Oswald Spengler, Decline of the West more well known than Dissonant Right than Law of Civilization and Decay book by Brooks Adams? I've never read Law of Civilization and Decay.
Let's look it up, shall we?
I've heard it's pretty good though. But of course, Spengler has
Brooks Adams, published in 1895. His intention was to prove the rise and fall of civilizations falls in a definite cycle of centralization and decay. Patterns of major Western history concentrating on economic and social factors. I think it also, like, keep in mind with like Spengler being popular is that his definitions of cycles, the winter, autumn, and spring and summer stages, and then what types of civilization, those are what people really take away.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that most guys on the right don't talk about the math chapter in the first part of Form and Actuality of Decline of the West.
Or the art criticism.
Or the art criticism. I'm determined to change that. I'm determined to do at least one video this year on Spengler and the chapter on math. So yeah.
Chapter of my book is on Spengler, so yeah.
Yeah, well, let me double check. He says, Prude, hold on, check DMs. All right, Owen, I am happily waiting. You have me on hand and foot.
When Prude starts sealing on us, this becomes the academic archipelago.
I'm tempted.
Oh man, yeah, like I love how he really does ream his audience sometimes. That's funny. Oh man.
So true. Now we're just waiting, or I'm just waiting.
What is Owen sending you?
I have no idea, but you know what?
I guarantee you this.
I guarantee you it's probably either an artwork piece or something that I'm going to get tagged in that I'm not all that for. Well, with that being said, that sort of brings us to the end of the show. I didn't have much planned outside of our discussion here with Sean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been almost 3 hours, so I think we did pretty well.
Well, the show usually runs for 3 hours, so it's always nice when it ends before the 3 hour mark. Oh, God, I've been tagged in something.
It's been a while since I've actually read that part about what he says about the Renaissance, but...
here we go. We have it. We have it. We've got it. So I'll put it up on the air. Share screen. There we go. And this is what we'll conclude with tonight.
Okay, zoom in. What is...
Can I... Hold on. Let me open image in new tab and see if I can zoom in that way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's way too far zoomed in. Let's go zoom in this way. There we go.
It doesn't make sense. What was Musk?
Here.
Musk homework?
Math homework.
Bike riding skills and XDMs? Where did they all go? It's Gio's locker.
And we end the show on a good note.
Oh, yeah, that's good. All right.
All right, ladies and gents. Well, we're going to call it a night here. We will be back live next week. We've got a great Canadian-focused episode where Dimes from Blood Satellite joins us to cover a strange little documentary about the sovereign citizens of Canada.
Schizo. Yeah. So it's going to be fun.
We'll see you all next Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen.
God bless. Goodbye.
See you then. God bless you.
Too sweet. We'll see you then,
All
gents.
right.